morning. Oh, gonna need the microphone over here. Good morning. How are you? I'm having a good morning. It's winter's coming. Winter's coming in Alberta. We got some negative weather, maybe some snow this morning. It's the first of the year, but it's coming, and that's going to happen. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. Today is going to be a good Friday because we have more OPP today. We're going to finish up with Craig Abrams and get on to Carson Pardee. I can't help but have a song in my head from growing up. If you are a 90s kid or you grew up in the 90s listening to some of the gangsta rap, there was a song, "You Down with OPP? Yeah, you know me." Yep, that's me. That's how I feel about this right now because I'm down with OPP, the Ontario Provincial Police. What they've been doing the last couple days is blowing it all up, blowing up the narrative with truth. They don't have an agenda. They're not trying to go ahead and change anything. They're just telling the truth. What's some of the truth? Well, the OPS was asking for things that were not legal. The OPS were asking for things that were not reasonable. For example, just have your officers stand around. We don't know what we're going to have them do yet. That's not reasonable. Lots of resources. The OPS doesn't seem to really care about expenditure of resources, but they certainly like to complain about it as a reason and an excuse for their inability to actually do what they need to be doing. So we heard a lot about that, and I think we're going to hear some more truth. Today's going to be all truth. All we have is Craig Abrams and Carson Pardee. Now, Carson Pardee, he appears to be a very senior officer. I think he's a super lieutenant as well, based out of Nova Scotia. So that'll be interesting to see. Not sure why he's there. At least that's according to his LinkedIn. It could be stale. It happens. But we'll get to know him when he takes the hot seat and gives us more truth. I don't expect to find anything counter to any of the other OPP officers. I think we're going to hear a lot more of the same. I think we're going to hear more about, because he seems to be very senior, more about command, more about cooperation. How does the OPP traditionally work with municipalities and the federal government? You're going to learn a little bit more about how the provincial police actually work. So if you're in a province that doesn't have provincial police, you're getting a good insight on what the value of a good provincial police could do. Police forces could be corrupt because of local people, whatnot. It's always good to have another level to be able to turn to. So Ontario, Quebec, I believe it's New Brunswick also has a police force, and China has a police force in Canada. So all these organizations understand the value of having their own police force. And I would like to see Alberta be the fifth one in Canada to establish their own police force, right behind China, who did it this year and I think last year. But anyway, I would like to see Alberta have them for these reasons here, because I think it's very, very good to go ahead and establish through sovereignty or independence police force. And we're seeing why. If the OPP didn't exist, not only would we not be getting this perspective and this kind of truth, could you imagine what it would have been like if the OPS had no resistance from the provincial police? Because there are none. What if the police didn't exist at all? And OPS and RCMP and PPS, the Parliamentary Protective Services, were able to just work away and do what they needed to do or wanted to do. Actually, I want to highlight wanted to do. It was, I think we all benefited greatly to have the OPS even jurisdictionally in the area and involved with this incident. I also think, good morning, Prairie. How's Manitoba? Is winter coming as well? I like to think that we can continue to rely upon the OPP. They haven't been giving me any of the I'm here to protect my butt vibes at all. We're not seeing a lot of redaction in their documents other than maybe phone numbers. That makes sense. Their email addresses aren't even redacted. So there's a lot of, I think, unfiltered truth coming out of the OPP. And today is going to be pretty much the same thing. Oh, good morning, Denise. Nice to see you as well. Denise, is it Jean or Jean? I was debating with my wife if it's Jean or Jean. Maybe you can let me know en français or in English. Nice to see you this morning too. So I'm looking forward to today. And hi Perry, warmer yesterday and today double digit. Wow! So you got the good weather right now. Yeah, we're looking at a little bit of snow here. But that's okay. That's Alberta. We can handle it. We're tough. So yeah, Alberta, I think you should have a police force. The OPP is showing you exactly why you should have your own police force. Do you really want to rely upon the RCMP, CSIS, other federal level policing intelligence, or do you want to start establishing your own? I think if you copy the OPP program and you take a good look at how they developed their system and various reports and intelligence. And I assure you, Alberta, I assure you, the OPP would be very pleased to make you a partner and would be very pleased to help give you some guidance and guidelines on lessons learned from their part. So consider it. And I would actually push it. Danielle Smith, it's on the list for Free Alberta Police Force. So can you kind of let us know where you're headed with that? We would like to see it. I do like the current the local dispatchment for the RCMP. There's some good people there. I'm not trying to get rid of them. That's not really the purpose of having our own police force. It's just to have our own sovereignty, our own police force, and make sure that we can do things that we need to do, much like the Ontario provincial police are doing right now. I think Tamara Lynch wouldn't have been dragged across the country had we had our own police force. We would have required some sort of extradition. We would have required probably approval from our court, an order from our court to approve it. I would have liked to have seen that happen instead of just a federal warrant being executed because the RCMP are federal and they had jurisdiction. So for that reason alone, I would like to also see the Alberta Police Force come into play. So the APP, let's get down with that one now. Who's down with the OPP? Well, let's get down with the APP. I'd like to see that. All right. So this morning, as usual, we're doing the recaps of the previous day. And yesterday had two. So we had the OPS, which were certainly covering butts, blaming fingers or pointing fingers, and sadly admitted to not checking out the reports from the OPP. And in hindsight, they really should have, and they admitted to that. And then it was followed by the first part of Craig Abrams from the OPP, which it was more the same as we were hearing from Pat Morris, except for Craig Abrams was a little bit more direct on how he was displeased with the functions of the OPS, what they were doing, what they were asking for. He was far more vocal, and he created a will say, which is a document of his thoughts and his truth at the time. And I think Craig Abrams is a stellar witness. I'm glad the commission called him, and now we're going to see what Christine thinks. I haven't watched this one yet. It was a busy day of getting videos ready, so I'm catching up on that for you. But I'll watch it with you, and I'll have some. And as usual, I'm sure 99.9% of everything she says I'm in agreement with, but I don't agree with everything. So let's figure out what we got here. Enjoy.
Hi there. Thanks for tuning into the Canadian Constitution Foundation's Freedom Update. Today was the sixth of these two people, the Premier and Solicitor General, as witnesses. And if they do, we would like to cross-examine them. Okay, that's all I have for you today. Please subscribe to the channel. You can also subscribe for our online freedom updates at the ccf.ca/freedom updates. And if you want to support our work participating in this historic inquiry, please consider making a tax-deductible donation at the ccf.ca/donate. We would not be able to participate without the generous contributions from all of our donors. So to everybody out there who donates, thank you so much. Okay, that's all for this update. Thank you.
I wanted to leave that last bit in there because, support the CCF. They're doing fantastic work, obviously. Doug Ford, let's get him there. He's got some explaining to do. Why didn't the province assist more? Why didn't the province offer more? Could they have offered more? Was there conversations going on? Yeah, let's hear all that. That sounds like a great idea. Solicitor General as well. So what laws were available? I do remember Ontario Solicitor General coming out shortly after or during the protest, claiming that there was a bunch of what she, I think, referred to as holes or gaps or limitations in the law that they will rectify in the next legislation. They told the whole entire world, hey, yeah, we don't have enough laws and we're going to make some more. It's as simple as that. We're going to make some more so that we can have a lot more control and dictatorship on our people. Hopefully the Ontario Assembly is going to debate that and challenge that and fight anything that takes away more liberty and quashes peaceful protest. Because I don't think there was anything that justifies any new laws. In fact, we should be rolling back some laws. And if anything, we should be adding oversight and restrictions to the government next time. I don't think there's anything else that's needed for the people. That works, but also in your description video. Okay, sure. Yeah, no, yeah, great idea, Prairie. I'm learning all that stuff. I think what I'll do is I'll build up a longer description that includes things like the channel for CCF, even the website for the Public Order Emergency Act Commission. So thank you, Prairie. And actually, if you don't mind, do you have a suggestion on what I should be putting in there? You want to type it out for me? You can throw it to an email or something. I'll be happy to take any assistance. Cool, Prairie. Yeah. So I'll do that. And I'll even go back to the other videos and put that stuff in there as well. So when people are coming back to them, it's there going forward. Thanks for the suggestion. And if there's any more, it's exactly what I'm looking for. The stream's looking great today. I do have Starlink, and it is snow, so there's some weather. It did drop for a second there, but it's holding up. So if you do see it go black for a second or two, please just bear with us. We'll get right back as quickly as we can. The goal is to get this information to you as much as we can. And yeah, and I think so far we've been getting exactly that, a lot of information. Canada should be proud of this commission so far. It's not interfering a lot. The commission itself is not interfering a lot. The first questions that we get are from Commission Counsel. So the commission itself has a counsel who's asking questions because it's the commission's job to drive the commission, right? So that's why you'll have the commission counsel go up there and ask a bunch of things. If you pay close attention to the commission counsel's questioning, they're being pretty good on going down the middle and pulling out information. We don't have to wait for the cross for stuff to come out all the time. We are seeing questions and information come out during the committee's council questions. So that's a great indicator that the committee is doing the very best to navigate down the center of this issue and to pull out information from all sides. Of course, when you see the cross, it's not like a traditional cross where you have one side where they are the ones that brought the action and they're trying to prove their position. And then you have the counter position. That's typically the way it is. Small claims court, civil court, hearings. But this particular one, they're not really opposition. They are representatives of groups with standing. So this is why it's not really crossing, because sometimes it's the government of Canada who's that representative, and they are trying to add more information that bolsters the government position. And sometimes it's the convoy itself. So we're hearing, the questions are being pulled out are very specific to the actions of the convoy, and it does feel more like a cross. And then sometimes you get someone like the representative for the businesses and actually I have his name now, the businesses for the residents, Paul Champ, the Mr. Tax the Rich sticker on his laptop guy. Then when he comes out, he's against everybody. So he's destroying the narrative for the government. He's destroying the peacefulness of the protesting. At least he's trying. He's going after everybody. So he's like a cross, right? He's kind of crossing everybody. So, when we're watching this, we're going to see the committee council come out, pull out questions that they're interested in, which really directly relate to the mandate that they have, which is to interrogate whether or not the grounds were there for the Emergency Act. And then you'll see other people come up and have their time and represent their group. And it's been quite interesting so far. Some of the groups we haven't heard from yet who are there, who have standing, probably they're just waiting for their province or the issue to be about their province. But the government of Alberta is there. We haven't heard anything from them yet. The government of Saskatchewan and the government of Manitoba are there. The Manitoba one and Saskatchewan, yeah, they got granted standing. I'm not sure for, well, I kind of read it. They don't want the precedent that the federal government can just do stuff. Like the Emergency Act required consultation with the provinces. So I think for Saskatchewan, Manitoba, that's really where they're there for. They're going to be addressing why there was no consultation. It was more of a dictation. We heard that through both of their opening statements, that that's what their concern was. So we're not going to hear much from them until that's there. Okay, now I hear some audio, so I may have to just shut up soon and kick you over. I don't see the commissioner, though. And then, of course, Alberta, because of Coots and the non-consultation, they're definitely going to play a big role coming up.
Order
and here we
allowed.
go. Enjoy the stream. To answer that question, Chief Super Lieutenant Purdy will be next after the 15-minute break. Hey, Wayne, how you doing, bud? I think you got mute on your end. There you are.
I certainly did, yeah. Yeah, not too bad, thanks, Jason. Resting today.
Nice to see you. You had...
And you too, mate.
Yeah, day 7, going strong. Long days. Yep.
What was yesterday like? Was it any good?
Was it any good? Do you know that song?
You get revelations, don't you, every day?
Yeah, no, it was wonderful. I think, well, we had this same witness yesterday. So this was the second half for Craig Abrams, Super Lieutenant Craig Abrams. He was very good yesterday because he definitely was taking notes. He did a will say statement, which is he just dumped all of his information into a big, long document. So he was able to recall lots of details. He had lots of notes. And basically his position was OPS was messing things up quite a bit. We've offered our help a lot. We had concerns on certain things. And then when OPS, the Ottawa Police Services, did come and ask for some assistance from the OPP, it was questionably legal. So they had lots of legal issues with what the requests were. They requested for the request to have clearance from the Crown attorneys. So they wanted to make sure the requests were legal. For example, one of the requests was to just go randomly pick up the organizer, the convoy organizers themselves. And the way the OPP referred to it yesterday is we don't just pick people up off the street. That's not how we work. So, you know, things like that. And yeah, and then they also highlighted how OPS wanted the OPP to provide about 500 officers with no plan, with no indication of what they would be doing. So the OPP simply said we don't operate that way.
Nobody does, do they?
Yeah, come back with a plan.
That amount. Why 500? You know.
That's a great question. We've heard quite a bit of testimony that these numbers were intentionally inflated, doubled. There was a meeting that made a lot of people uncomfortable that we heard about through this witness, Craig Super Lieutenant Abrams, that if they said they wanted or needed 200, they would ask for 400. There was this doubling of the resource requirements in the asks. Now, he did kind of say, you know, fluid situation, things are moving on. It can mean anything, but that was part of a conversation that made everybody uncomfortable because they were really trying to get down to the actual resources. What do you need? But they were responding with, quite literally, they were saying on the call, if we say 200, we want 400. So they were doing that. But yesterday was very good. I think yesterday was very good. We got a lot of truth, not a lot of shenanigans out of Craig Abrams. But the witness before, which was from the OPS itself, was very interesting because her favorite statement was, I don't know, I don't remember, and I didn't read that. There was a lot of deflecting on the intel because she was coming after the witness from the OPP, Pat Morris, who really shot a lot of holes into the narrative that resources were available. The trucker convoy size was known. The trucker plans was communicated. There was good communication with the trucker organizers the entire time. So Pat Morris really, ruined the narrative quite a bit because of that. We got a comment here. More. They wanted more. They always want more. They always want more. And then they say there wasn't enough. And then they say that's why we need the feds. So it kind of feels like it was an artificially created shortage. So that was his testimony yesterday. There was a lot more to it. I did post. I will be posting today the summary from yesterday. And I'll also be posting the summary from tonight. So there's now 7 days of summaries from me, which are just my commentary in between the inquiry.
I've only seen 2 summaries from yourself so far.
Yeah, well, over the last few days, I've been catching up and putting them up. So
but I don't know whether it's like shadow banning, because they are reducing a lot of people's posts.
Oh, really?
You'll see them all in the clump, either like 4 days later or 6 days later. I noticed that yesterday. So
really? So what do you see right now for me, if you don't mind? Because I'll show you what I see on my side.
Just for example, some friends, and I hadn't seen anything from them for quite a while, and then all of a sudden it was like, I've got this from you so many days later, and it's just like, where have you been hiding it? And it's just how the we call it the logistics, the algorithms.
Oh, you mean like feeding it into your feed or coming to my page?
Well, aren't you posting that on here as well, on Facebook?
No, the clips are not going on Facebook. The clips are going on
directly on YouTube. I remember seeing it, but I couldn't remember where I saw it. Maybe it is actually there then. Yeah, it is. So.
Yeah. So if you find, you should find them here, and I even have a playlist of them, so I'll post that as well. But each day, what I'm going to try and do is I'll finish the stream. It takes about 2 hours to download, encode, all that kind of stuff. But I'll try and get that done at the end of the day, at the end of the stream, so that and if anybody wants to catch up early, they can. And I also have one person on Twitter who already told me they're going to binge watch all 7 episodes this weekend. Good luck to you, because some of them are like an hour and a half. So there goes your day. But you will definitely get a quite a bit summary of the entire event, because each of my comments after each segment is what we're collecting there. So that could be helpful.
Of course, because you can't sit down for every single minute.
I am.
Well, I mean yourself, because you're chairing.
Yeah.
But if you then stepped away or whatever, you could just miss just even a few comments in one little section, and that would be the clincher. That would be the big moment. And and
to anybody listening, what I would recommend you do for your summaries is watch the Canadian Constitution Foundation. They do a great summary. Christine does a great summary. It's about between 15-20 minutes each day, it seems like. So that's a great.
There's a post, didn't you?
I do. And I'm going to start including it in the description. That was a recommendation from someone in the chat to put that in the description. But if you only have 30 minutes and you want to catch up, watch their summary. If you have about an hour or so and you want to get into more of the nitty-gritty, what happened between the lines, and more of an immediate response to what happened, watch my summary, because that's happening as it's happening. But then, of course, if you want to watch the whole thing, those are also available as well. And another trick I would suggest some people to do is go through the chat. If you don't want to do the whole 9 hours, go through the chat, because in the chat, we respond quite a bit as it's happening. And if you see like a wow or oh my or something like that, you can go to the chat, and then you can kind of have the video move to that portion. So then you can kind of move around and see what was going on. So if you really want to dig into what was happening real time, that's another way to do it. I do use the chat to kind of remind me where there was good points, so I might clip them later.
That's what I did today when before I was joining the show. I just scrolled back to see what I'd missed.
Yeah, it was handy. And I'm trying to the people in my chat, the regulars who are hanging out all the time. If I don't put the name of the lawyer asking questions, it's because I missed it, or I can't get the spelling and I can't find it. If you know the name and you don't see it in the scroller at the bottom, put it in the chat. That will help me, and then I'll add it to my notes, and going forward, I'll be able to identify all the lawyers, because they come in quickly. They say their name quickly, and some of them are not Smith and Jones, so it's hard to find them. So if you do know who, yeah, sorry,
that last guy, stop the rich guy.
yeah,
I didn't know his name until I saw it just pop up at the end. I thought, brilliant. There you go.
yeah, it's incredible. He hasn't taken that away yet. He should. I
Hasn't
think her
somebody
book
warned
comes
him
out
about
today.
it?
Sorry.
Hasn't somebody warned him about it?
That's a bad message, because it's really showing your bias, your position, and it's
That's
also a radical position. It's not
Mm.
even a mainstream position. It's a radical position. 10-4. Oh, look at that. Yeah, look at this. My regulars here, Denise, Law. Yeah. So if I don't have the name in there, any help you guys can provide would be wonderful, and I'll do that. But yeah, we've had a good morning. And Wayne, so 1 second. Great. I do want to let everybody know that during the break today, we are possibly doing another whistleblower. So I was contacted over this week after the first whistleblower one went out. There's another one. I don't want to give too many details until they're comfortable doing it, but they do work in the higher education in Canada, and it's related to similar as the other whistleblower who wanted to kind of set the record straight on how the mandates and vaccine rollouts were happening in the higher education. It's one of the top 5 universities, so I'm kind of eager. It might be done through the chat, live chat. It might be done through audio. We're not quite sure yet. We're working on it. I'd also like to let you know that we do have confirmation of 2 more guests joining us during the lunch break. If you're on Twitter, you're going to know one of them, especially if you follow me. You're likely going to be following him as well, because it's Chris Erickson. K Erickson V2 is his current Twitter. He had to rebuild his Twitter because he's very outspoken, very accurate, and he's going to be a wonderful guest. Political mind. He worked in the BC legislator for a bit. Excellent mind. So stick around for lunch. You'll be hearing from him. And a little bit after Chris, we'll also be hearing from the real Andy Lee. So Andy Lee from the Real Andy Lee Show is going to be joining us. And she's got very little time. She got about half an hour, but we're going to welcome any minute we can get from Andy. She got great insights, and going to be looking forward to speaking to her. And quite possibly, we also may have Joe Rampart joining us. So Joe does a podcast on Twitter, and it's a very good podcast. He's very politically minded, and he has a very good following and a very good show. So if he can make it, we might be hearing from him as well. So today I'm going to be having a late lunch because we may have 3 more guests in addition to myself and Wayne. I think maybe you'll be sticking around.
Yeah, I'll be sticking around.
Great. Familiar with Aquitas. Denise, I'm not. Maybe you can fill us in. Kelly, what you up to? Oh, wow. Okay. For the guest, no, but or maybe you're responding to Denise there. Okay, yeah, okay, so yeah, the Trudeau investment, shares, stocks, where his fingers are, I'm sure there's quite a bit. We can maybe make a whole episode around that at some point. But I would have to look into it. What I would probably address on that would be the WE controversy, because that's been well documented and he's been disciplined on it. We can go down there, and then certainly anything that's public documents that we have access to, we can take a look at. Yeah, no, look, if there is financial ties, but look here, I've said this before, and I really don't think Trudeau is in this for the money through vaccine enrichment. I think Trudeau would be looking at legacy and family, surviving the transition. I do believe he thinks the world is in trouble. It's going to go through a transition. Either it's going to be human-led or climate-led. He is scared of both of them. And he believes that he needs to be a willing, cooperative participant in all of that to turn out on the proper end at the end. So I think he's thinking family line, legacy, not money. Money he's already taken care of, and he'll want not, and his family will want not for many generations. So that won't be his primary motivator. That will be just a benefit, the silver lining, the gravy, because they're going to be well taken care of. But I don't think that's what keeps him up at night and what allows him to do the agenda and push it forward. I think he's looking at legacy. I think he's looking at making sure he survives a transition because he believes there's a transition. Unfortunately for him, I don't think he's right. I don't think there's a climate transition, nor is there a human-led transition coming. Not if I have anything to do with it. Because if it has anything to do with policy and government, I'm certainly going to stand up to that one. Scared of his own show. Yeah, boy, they're getting scared of cranes. They're getting scared of bouncy castles, roasted pigs, trucks. These people, I feel a little bit bad for them because they seem to be painting a victim image, and they seem to think that that's a proper way to do it. The truth is, they're Canadians. They were strong. Majority of the residents had no problem with it. A lot of the businesses were reacting to other issues like government mandates and vaccine policies. So the truth is, a lot of the city really did just fine during that time. But we don't want to diminish the actual people who did experience it. I think their representative is doing a great job on really, really victimizing them tremendously from everybody. So they're being represented quite well from the tax the rich guy. And I'm sure they're going to get some more dollars. They've gotten 20 million already, so they might get more. I'm such a kind man. Okay. I just try to not take a aggressive position on anything. I think once you get into an aggressive position, it's past logic and reason, and it's gone to stubbornness and other things. I don't mind talking issues out, and I do want to give people the benefit of the doubt, because at the end of the day, I do believe that people can have remorse and apologize and work on things. I don't think anybody should be forever cast with a mistake they made, and then that should follow them forever. There's very rare exceptions, very rare exceptions. And even those rare exceptions, I think we might consider that they may have a mental issue, which would contribute more for their behavior than an actual human's desire. But then again, even to that, there's rare exceptions. Good job. Yeah, thanks, Lance. Hey, Don, how you doing? They better not use the money to buy new gas barbecues. No kidding. Didn't you hear that's the testimony around the danger of propane tanks being moved around? How do you think they do barbecuing? Come on. That's just ridiculous. He's just being ridiculous. Every vehicle is a container of gasoline moving around the city. It's just silly to try and turn that into a national disaster, even from the business and resident standpoint. They were afraid their building would blow up. I would like to meet that person who genuinely feels that way because they need a lot of help. Sorry, Wayne. It sounds like we're back. The audio's back. Let me get the screen on. And we should have a lunch in about an hour.
The commission is in recess for 1 hour. La commission levée pour 1 heure.
All right, we can unmute ourselves now. Hi, Wayne. Hi, Chris.
How are we doing, guys? All right.
Good, you?
Not too bad.
There
Welcome, Chris.
Thanks for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Just give me a sec as I kind of quickly recap that. Wow. Okay, so I got to say that one was a little bit drier than the last witness that we had before him. It was a little bit drier, but we're seeing some more finger pointing and butt covering. It's very clear. I'm not seeing this witness be as aggressive as the last ones when it comes to the OPP's position that the OPS was not doing a very good job. However, he is not being gentle either. He is being clear that there was meetings for meetings and no clear command structure, no clear person in charge. So, yeah, it's quite the mess. And we had a small little conversation there in the chat about whether or not are they kind of setting up for the OPP to start having new rights and new powers in order to take over when a city is not functioning well. I'm very concerned if that it becomes a recommendation and becomes a reality, because I'm quite pleased with the OPP so far. However, who makes that call? Who's the one that says, okay, enough is enough, provincial police come in? And I can only assume that if that situation did arise, it would be without the consent of the city police, because that would be the only situation where they would have to come in without to use that new law. Because all the other situations, it would be with consent and by request. So the city would be asking for the assistance. So they've done that a few times in the last few days, where they said things like, "Hey, OPP, why didn't you tell OPS what to do? Why didn't you guide them on where they should block roads within the city?" Stuff like that. And are you seriously asking a higher police force to take your jurisdiction away from you? It's incredible to me. I'm in shock that any city would even imply that they think a higher government should come and tell them what to do, unless they want a top-down government, because that's exactly what that would be setting up. So I'm resisting that a little bit, because I think that would be dangerous. I don't know who calls it, and I think it would be resisted by the police force. So that's my thoughts on that. Chris, you jumped into the chat and you saw some of that, and what do you think?
Well, I think it's telling at this point where, I mean, I'm surprised, honestly, like just for a general recap of because I've been on and off. I'm thankful that you're able to do this, because I haven't been able to keep up and watch every minute of it. But it's surprising. I mean, not really surprising the blame game is happening, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Is the recommendations that come out, you have to be extremely careful as far as the power grabs that we've seen throughout the process. Even just when the Emergencies Act was put in Freeland, all of a sudden some of these FinTrack stuff's now permanent. The centralization of power, I fully agree with you that I can't see any city. Why would they want to change it? If a city's in a desperate need, they put a request in, they take a look at the format what the needs are and deploy the resources, but you still have the command structure coming from the local city. It makes no sense that they would want to have anyone come in and usurp their power or lose control. That's not what the people who live in the city don't pay for that, right? They want to have their own people, and those relationships that are built oftentimes through the police forces allow them to have a better understanding of the ground as well too. So that if you remove that connectivity, you can have a little bit more of a detachment from what the needs are. So it's interesting they're going this way. It's with what we've seen so far come out. I mean, especially with Intelligence Officer Morris and other things that we've seen, that everything is a distraction now, outside and away from this. Right now, Trudeau's out there. He's making more announcements on handgun control and stuff, but that's literally just a press conference he held. But seeing the press gallery yesterday, not even full, there was 2 or 3 people there. So what I think that the takeaway from it, regardless of what the recommendations are, is in real time, we're able to use these tools to kind of counter narrative. And it's become very, very hard for anybody out there in the social media world to defend the positions of actually enacting this on the public. Every piece of the information so far. And so they're going to keep trying to throw each other under the bus as much as possible. And then see where the public will settle on who's the name. Is it Mendocino? Is it because if Trudeau was going to go, there's already enough out there. There's no point in sticking around, you know. And then if that happens, we get Freeland for a while, and a lot of people could argue that we already have Freeland. You know, as far as the brains behind all this is happening, but I do like it. I'm surprised that there's been as much honesty coming from the OPP. Like, I don't have a lot of faith in. Like, I come from the work I came from is all directed by, you can't give up faith in the system. You know, it's Kafka-esque. You got to keep going, even with the news we got about Peckford's case. It's expected, right? And then you go right into the appeals, and then, you know, you just got to keep soldiering forward. So I see this as a benefit for us to at least be able to show the world that, you know, I don't buy the Keystone Cop thing at all. I don't. It makes no sense, right? Like, especially when the negotiations were going on. And so there was no clear, if you're talking, someone who's done negotiations, mediations, and crisis management before, if you are in dialogue, you don't escalate behind the scenes, and you don't come in with your horses and everything else and freezing the bank accounts when you have dialogue. And so to me, it seemed more like that's the political side. Peaceful protest is allowed in this country, and if you were ever to look at an example of what a peaceful protest is, that's historic. And so I think the frustration was, you know, wherever the pressure's coming from, was get it done and get it over with. And now scrambling back through everything, they're looking at it, and no one wants to accept responsibility, right? They're just saying, you know, and you get the guy, like, I'll keep coming back to Morris. Morris should have ended Trudeau. and Mendocino and Freeland, but we have to stare. And it's like that. Everyone gets excited. Oh, this is it. Well, how many times has that happened over the past couple of years, right? Something comes out and everyone gets excited and it's ignored, right? So you just got to keep building that data. And so I think it's going to get even more interesting starting next week. But as far as what I'm seeing so far, that the honesty is surprising. Though I'm impressed with the lawyers. If this is the best the government has, then wow. Like it's just progressively. This is usually you get this kind of stuff on cross and other things, but you don't have them volunteering. So it gives me hope that you don't have that all-encompassing power as far as if everyone came out and was saying the exact same thing and sticking to a script and CBC was just covering. They're trying, but that's not happening. And so they just have, they're doing everything now. You'll have all these announcements and all this kind of stuff. And it's most likely, even if they have to have an election sooner than later, just to get this off the table, because it's only going to get progressively worse. That's my thoughts of things so far.
I agree. And I think Morris dug a really big hole for Trudeau. And now what we're going to see is Trudeau's trying to stack bodies on top of bodies so he can climb out of that hole by the time he takes a stand. It's a very deep one, so he's going to be walking all over people sacrificing themselves all the way up. Because they're not even being shy about how incompetent and disorganized they have been. Diane Deans, I think it is, she just let the cat out of the bag. She secretly recorded the mayor. In that recording, it was her notice to the mayor that she replaced the chief. That was the first time the mayor even knew that the chief was being replaced. But she told him, all right, I replaced the chief. And if you listen to that phone call and you pay attention to what may have been happening legally, she was honeypotting him. She was trying to get him to take the bait of freaking out on her for doing that. He handled it well. And then inside of that phone call, she said, hey, am I going to face a no confidence vote here? So the cover your ass was happening real time on that one.
Yeah.
And then when the recording was played in court or at the hearing, she felt like she was not victimized. She was vindicated that she had the magic bullet. But if you listen to it, it sounded to me like a desperate person who was trying to trap somebody, and she doesn't even realize how bad she comes off on it. And then she just went and had a testimony about, yeah, I know I wasn't sure if I was going to be targeted for it. I don't have to give the mayor. Hello, Andy Lee. I don't have to give the mayor a notice or anything. And yeah, and then that's where she left that recording. And I found that weird because all official meetings, they definitely will have recording equipment. If this is meant to be officially recorded, it's going to be officially recorded. But she's using her cell phone, a personal cell phone, to do that. So there's something behind that. I would like to say hello to Andy Lee. Hi. Lots of Twitter hearts and stuff back and forth. So it's great to finally get you here, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great.
I don't know where my little contact is on Twitter, so I'm going to keep that conversation going with them to see if we get them to join us. But have you been watching the inquiry, Andy?
As much of it as I can. I hadn't watched as much this morning, just because I've been in and out. But yeah, so maybe if you guys can catch me up if I've missed anything. But it's been pretty fascinating so far. The levels of dysfunction are. It's hard to fathom what would happen if we ever actually had a national security issue.
Exactly.
Right. So yeah, I think Pat Morris's testimony was probably the most explosive and probably the least covered. But some really interesting gems coming out with Abram yesterday about the dispute that was going on between OPP and OPS as to how to handle the protesters. And obviously they had very, very different approaches that they wanted to take. The OPP seemed like they wanted to take a less heavy-handed approach and try to go more for the negotiation route. And that was obviously blocked by OPS. So really, really fascinating to see what was unfolding behind the scenes this whole time that we didn't know about.
Yeah, and the wording that they use, the language that they use, they're talking about enemies, and they're talking about dehumanizing. Yeah. They're talking about taking away supplies. We had someone in our chat remind us that that's against international rules. You cannot, even if they are protesters, they're protected persons under the Geneva Convention. So you're not allowed. Yeah, you're not allowed to even interfere with supplies. So bragging about how they tried to stop even the fuel tanks, that's against conventions, people. And let's be real. What are we talking about? We're talking about the energy source for heating of a vehicle in winter during a protest for a human. This is what we're talking about. We're not talking about some rogue state that kind of came into Canada to try and cause problems. We're talking about Canadians who traveled across the country to have their voice heard. It's shocking to me that the
Well, that's how
language
they were
that they're
treated,
using.
wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the language that they're using. So from
They were really necessities of life at that point, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how many of you guys actually attended the protest, but I mean, it was dreadfully cold. Like it was unbearably cold. You know, we relied on those fires and things like that. And you know, I was probably in every single one of those trucks at one point warming up
Oh, wow.
to charge my batteries. So you know, it wasn't just seizing, you know, fuel. It was seizing necessity of life at that point, I think. And yeah, it was pretty shocking to hear how OPS was, you know, sort of skirting the OPP and planning to do these snatch and grabs and these arrests. I wasn't aware of that at the time, that they were, you know, planning that sort of thing at Coventry. So
Yeah, we had great
Wow.
testimony yesterday, specifically on that one, Andy, where they kind of set up the protesters. So the police liaison teams for the OPP were in great conversation with the group at Coventry, and they were going to negotiate the removing of fuel. It was a safety concern. The fire department came in. They all agreed, let's move this fuel. So we heard testimony yesterday from the OPP that during that movement of fuel is when the OPS decided to cancel that and then arrest them all as they left Coventry. And that killed all of the trust that was going on with the PLT teams, both OPP and OPS, with the convoy. And now we see the city come out with stats saying, hey, we arrested a bunch of people during this event. But they're also including things like that, where they set people up, caught them on the street after they left the area, and arrested them against the agreement of moving. Hi, Joe. Welcome back. Of moving the fuel. So we saw things like that, and I think that kind of behavior is like a tactic. They're trying to use tactics to get numbers for arrests. They're trying to provoke. They're likely trying to get the convoy side to get incredibly upset and lose all trust with OPP's PLT team. And as we know, OPP's team is fantastic across the province. They're dealing with protests all the time, various types, short ones, long ones. We keep hearing about city of Ottawa not having resources, but yet here's a fantastic resource who not only could have taken over all of PLT communication, they likely would have resolved it. Wayne, you're from the UK, so you're watching this with a different lens from outside of Canada. How does this look to you with your impression of Canada before? And are we looking weak here? Can a rogue state decide to plan this weekend to get about a bunch of trucks, some horns, a roasted pig, and go ahead and take over Ottawa? Is that the impression we got now?
Yeah, it's absolutely shocking, wasn't it? I mean, I remember seeing when I was on Twitter last year, seeing the protests and everything that was going on. And you're basically just fighting for the right to live, you know, because of what they were trying to put on you. And so trying to stay warm, trying to eat was just a basic right. To take that away from you because you're having too much fun on your bouncy castle, it's just mean, isn't it? It's before it got brutal, it was just bullying, wasn't it? And then it turned nasty, it really did. And they're just trying to criminalize everything. So watching some of this on this inquiry, it's very interesting because so far you're hearing so many different points of view, and just a little bit I've caught today. Yeah, you're getting a totally different point of view. This was the OPP guy, and he was just trying to be very fair and not paint things too bleak, whereas he's been barraged by questions trying to lay blame at anybody's door. So, yeah, they've all got different points of view.
Yeah,
You see what's trying to head.
Yeah, and it bothered me seeing their tactical layout for their plan. And one of the major bullet points was fuel, funds, fun. And then inside the brackets, they said online fundraising. And they said bouncy castle, hot tubs, dancing, and parties. It's like, wow. Yeah, no, strategically, you're going to war with your enemy because they have fun as one of the agendas that you want to get rid of. And let's face it, Andy, you were there. the whole purpose of fun was to move, enjoy, and it was a good atmosphere. This was not a hostile atmosphere. Have some fun, dance, enjoy yourself, meet people. So, Andy, going forward, do you think the U.S. military needs to get a bouncy castle force going, because this is now a strategic weapon for many states to use against Canada and maybe other countries?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's definitely changed the face of how we're going to protest. I mean, we saw that because I went down for the Rolling Thunder and I marched with James Top as well. I did my own farmers protest and brought some large farm equipment to Edmonton as well in the fall. And so, they're definitely better prepared now. They're not allowing us to approach the downtown area and things like that. We actually had a chopper on us when we were bringing the farmer
Wow.
to Edmonton. So, I think it's definitely changed the way that we police and protest and things like that, unfortunately. And of course, I did threaten to camp on Parliament Hill on Canada Day, and that caused quite an overreaction. The police actually made their headquarters in my hotel. I messaged them on Twitter. Yeah, they ran their operations out of my hotel, because as soon as I got to my hotel on Canada Day, I was like, why are there so many police here? And then they actually had their headquarters set up on the second floor of my hotel. So I dropped by and said hi. I said, don't worry, we come in peace. Don't get your undies in a bundle. We're going to do our Canada Day thing, and then we're going to leave. So don't freak out. I did end up pitching a tent. Bylaw came and got me, but I did finally manage to get a tent up, late in the evening on Canada Day. Bylaw came down and said, we've been waiting for you, take it down. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to snap a picture of it first. So it's really, really changed the way. And, we've got this real overreaction of whenever there's a protest, there's a lot of, logistics and planning and a lot of resources that go into manage these demonstrations now. So it's really, really unfortunate, I think, because I think it's restricted to a degree our right to protest, when they have to corral us into places and things like that. I mean, I think it's really unfortunate that there wasn't more collaboration at the beginning of the truckers convoy between OPP, because I do think that we could have, that first weekend when we rolled in, I do think that we could have organized the trucks in a fashion so that we knew that there was always a clear route, so that full streets didn't get blockaded off, and we didn't get that gridlock situation. And, that was all stuff that could have been done ahead of time to make sure that there was a more peaceful coexistence from the start. And I just don't buy that, they didn't see us coming and all that. That was nonsense. I met the trucker convoy here in Calgary. I think it was January 20. I want to say it was 23rd.
Okay.
Or in and around there. And after that, I did an interview with Western Standard, and I said, because I just wanted to get a feel of the numbers. There was a couple of hundred of us at that point. And, I was just like, no, there's not 50,000 of us. That was the rumor going around, but it's not a fringe minority. And it doesn't matter if there's 2,000 or 200. Right now, we have enough people to gridlock the city and shut the city down. That's the number. So that was well aware, a week out. Like, I was like, it doesn't matter. And this is only one leg of the convoy. So right now it's already big enough to shut the city down. So the city should prepare themselves. And, I had senators and MPs that liked that tweet. So they were all well aware that this was coming. So, I think it was really a strategic failure from the start. And I think it was set up maybe to a degree to fail. I think that they wanted us to come in, make a scene, misbehave, sort of be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
Be all those nasty things that they said about us. But unfortunately, we behaved ourselves for the most part, and that didn't happen. And then they got themselves into the situation where, they had to sort of, enact this War Measures Act against, super peaceful, silly protests. And it was just, the more people that joined in, the sillier it got, right? We just tried to make an entire farce of it.
Yeah.
And that was part of the purpose of it, was to ridicule the government, right? It was also against mandates and vaccines, but it was also, I think a lot of people just showed up because they wanted to ridicule the government, right? They wanted to ridicule all this rhetoric that they've been fighting against for a couple of years. So yeah, but it's definitely changed, the way that we police and protest in Canada. And I think that's unfortunate that, that had to come about.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point there. And Chris, I'm going to turn to you on this next question. How are protests going to change across Canada? First Nations, pipelines, etc. Are they going to be impacted and affected as well? So are we going to see BC making changes? Is this going to be a nationwide recommendation coming out for protests and limitations? Chris, what do you think? First Nations, pipelines, all the other protests that we enjoy in Canada and have, what do you think is going to be changing there?
Well, I think that's the scary part as far as what the final recommendations are, and what the final language of the document is. For me, it's that's where you look at the left-right paradigm. I don't think it's obviously not a good thing. I mean, most of what I've seen the government do was, like Andy, like they expected and they wanted chaos just to justify the ability to use. So they start agitating. And like I mentioned before, if you're engaged in dialogue and still come in that you don't talk to the people, but you have the federal government coming over your shoulder with the hammer, with where we see all the rhetoric going in regards to natural resource development and things, I think that it's unfortunately, 2 years from now, if Poilievre wins, I think he's going to take a much more aggressive, if these powers remain, if he's got this ability when those protests start again, this precedent has been set. And so I think that when the left, and I don't like to say the left, because each group has their grievances and there's multitude of characteristics to it. But when you see how the difference between when we had blockades and stuff and didn't have this usage, right? And then you have fun being trampled because it's politically improper. And you also have a situation where that conflict that comes from the ideology, right? I mean, some First Nations, to me, I've been around both, where I've worked with First Nations that are totally opposed to pipelines, and I've worked with First Nations that are it's their only way to get out of poverty, unless you want to grow a ton of weed, and I encourage that. But there's not much opportunity, and so when you have that exploitative dynamic of big business, you've got government, you've got opposing ideologies, and if you have a conservative government that comes in and is very pro-resource development, which I am a fan of as long as it's done responsibly. I think we should be energy independent, doing what we can to maximize that without long-term negative impacts. But I think that it's going to be a rude awakening for a lot of people that cheered this on the left when they decide they want to stand up. And it's going to be difficult. And with First Nations, and in BC, it's a bit different because First Nations have had success in the courts with regards to sovereignty. So the other provinces are treaty based and stuff, and that didn't happen here. So there is more legal arguments that are going to be made with Nisga'a and Chilcote and having success. And BC is very much wanting to implement the United Nations Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So there's a whole bunch of different dynamics coming together, and I think that the first test will be any projects restarts. Alberta will be different, but I think that you're probably going to see a lot of conflict in BC come time for the next conservative government if they want to try and work with it. We're stuck in BC. We don't have much outside of timber, and when I see what they're cutting down with the old growth forests and how they've handled those protests and the different approaches, it is it's tenuous. So I'm hoping that whatever comes out of this, and that's the problem. If we had a judiciary, or if we had, this is just a hearing, right? I mean, the evidence so far, I'm thinking they should be arresting people. Like, so how do you get integrity back into these systems so that you're able to prevent these conflicts when the government seems to just want to agitate to provoke a response that gives them the justification to secure more power? And when it comes to resource, you have different opinions. You have those that want to get right on to green energy and oil's bad, all the petroleum products are bad. When you see the speed at which they're trying to institute this, the conflict is going to come. And I think at the very least, I'm surprised we haven't seen more Indigenous communities rising up to oppose a lot of things, but the system there doesn't necessarily allow for it with funding and the way things work. A lot of their voices are silenced. But as someone who carried the charter for 20 years, I don't like the looks that I'm seeing as far as what rights we have to address, to have any kind of redress. And so when you can't take people to court and you can't get injunctions and it's all lopsided, the frustration is just going to build. And then when you look at the Indigenous communities that are trying to build natural resources or gain access to some kind of development on their land, to have that restricted, you're taking that hope away, which is going to create a dynamic. Those who want, climate change, and those are like, we need to eat and have heating for our homes and jobs and employment and the ability for us to see a brighter future. So specifically with Indigenous communities, it's going to get pretty rough, I think, if POEC gets in. I hope he has more dialogue, and he seems to be pro-business, but you can't be just pro-business. You have to take both sides into account. And we often don't see that. It's just split right along the ideological lines.
Mm-hmm.
You don't agree with this, you're an enemy. That's just not how Indigenous people work, in my experience. Let's have that dialogue and see what we can find to work for everybody, but exploitation's happening on both sides.
I kind of agree most of that. Andy, when you were doing the convoy and you were meeting with them during this, did you ever get the impression from them that they didn't have a mission and they didn't have a goal or they didn't have a plan at all? Or was it just straight up grassroots and people just showed up in Ottawa and said, all right, now what do we do? Because what we hear from the OPS is that's what they thought happened. And when we hear from the OPP, they knew every step of the way. But within the convoy itself, what was the general feeling? Did people kind of feel organized and they had a mission, a safe, peaceful protest? Or was it really just a bunch of grassroots tagging along the way? What was the general sense for you?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Like, I wasn't involved in a lot of the, the inner circle of missions. Like, I knew Tamara and I knew Tom and, Tom Marazzo and Tom Quiggin. So, but I didn't have like a lot of those internal, I did talk to some of the road captains along the way. So it was a little bit of both. Like, it was an organized movement. Like I said, I talked to the road captains, met them in Calgary, things like that. So they did have a plan, but I don't think that anybody knew, and I don't think anybody, anticipated how big it was going to get and how powerful it was going to get. I started to realize, though, because I followed them from Calgary to the border of Saskatchewan. I didn't intend to. I just intended to meet them in Calgary. I just wanted to see what it was all about. But I was sort of enchanted with the people that I met. I was very, very alarmed by the reporting that was already coming out that was painting these people in a negative light. I ran the federal election. I'm a huge, believer in our democracy and the right to protest and our charter rights. So I was very, very alarmed by that verbiage that I saw coming out very, very early. And I felt that they were very, very vulnerable. And maybe a little bit naive, and they didn't realize that if this grew to be a powerful movement, which it did, how the things that they said may be used against them, and things that they did say, unfortunately, were used against them. Their memorandum of understanding, I do believe that they wrote it in a good-spirited nature, but I do think that it was written with a little bit of naivete, that they didn't understand the full implication of that and how that could come back to bite them later on, and it did. And that was where the whole, it's an insurrection that we're going to overthrow the government line came from. So I didn't intend to really, join in with them. But, once I met them and I was confident that, they were altruistic and good natured, and, they weren't a bunch of terrorists. I felt sort of that they needed, and that they were vulnerable, and that they could use all the coverage that they could get to help, insulate them a little bit, and try to guide them. And I did make some recommendations that were controversial. Like I had problems when I met Pat King. I met him in Calgary. I was concerned about his state of mind, his stability, and his ability to, handle it and lead and be, a good representative of what the convoy stood for. So I had concerns, and I said, maybe you guys might want to think about removing him. And he did end up being a liability. And of course, he did end up going to jail, unfortunately, right? So, I think in hindsight, we all would have done things differently, right? But I think that it also points to the fact that nobody understood exactly what this was going to grow into. Right. I began to understand once, we were getting up to small towns near the border of Saskatchewan, and we still had, 50, 100 people standing there in minus 20-degree weather with flags. I mean, we're talking about small towns in Alberta that were on the CB radio chat waiting for us to come through. And I thought, wow, this has got the potential to be big. Right. And so then I decided that, I should go to Ottawa and follow them to Ottawa. And I did. And tried my best to be fair and to debunk some of the stories that came out and things like that. A lot of the protesters had different medical views than I have, right? I'm vaccinated. But I did feel like they had a charter right to this demonstration, and that right should be protected. So did my best, but like I said, I don't think it was, it wasn't like there was a whole bunch of undercover calls going on, like
Right.
between us being like, let's do this and let's do that. I mean, it was chaos. I couldn't even get a hold of Tamara after that, that first talk that I had with her. It was just sort of, it was an avalanche. It steamrolled, right? It was a snowball that we pushed down a hill in BC. And by the time, we got to Ottawa, it was this massive thing. And I don't think anybody really foresaw it. So it was a bit of both. There was logistics and there was planning, but it was also very much, a fluid situation that people were trying to adapt with at the moment.
And I think you nailed it. And I think letting the rhetoric get away from them was something that really hurt everybody. There was passion, anger, frustration. And yeah, I think that MOU certainly upped the ante a bit, and it's definitely going to bite them in the butt. And that reminds me of Diagolon. So Diagolon, which was, kind of fringily involved, was distant, they're memeing, but because of the rhetoric and the aggressiveness and some of the sound bites that can come from a group and a leader, it really, I think, hurts the entire purpose. I really liked the spirit of Dialogue, which was to troll the government, to meme them, to even give them a fake boogeyman. I really like that. But the part that that hurt them is when they come up with some of that rhetoric and those sound bites, a little bit too much, because the average Canadian can stand up and say, yeah, we stand on guard for thee. It's in our anthem. So we will stand on guard for thee. And that could also mean our rights. So it doesn't necessarily mean a border. It also means our rights. But Canadians don't react well to negative rhetoric, especially violent or just way over the top. So to anybody else out there who's thinking about putting a grassroots group together, keep the language professional. Like let's keep it civil. You don't have to play the games. Sure, we're getting called names, and sure they're trying to provoke us, but don't fall into that provoke and play the same game. Passions were high, language was high. I can understand it, but I do agree with you, Andy, that whenever the rhetoric gets in there, it causes more problems than it solves. So I would love to see if there's any more rhetoric going forward. It's a lot calmer. Stuff out of Tom Marazzo was closer to what I would like to see from a leader, because he was keeping things pretty even keel. He was also firm. I think the only challenge there is he wasn't fully accepted and trusted. He has some background that may have indicated that maybe he has old connections or something. But unfortunately, with a grassroots group who doesn't actually have a leader, that's exactly what you're going to get. You're going to get good leaders step up, bring some ideas forward, but you're also going to get some resistance within that group as well. Why is he trying to calm us down? We need to be upset. So then you'll get some division around that. When, it's a really good idea to stay level-headed, talk to the PLTs, make as much movement and forwardness on your message as possible. So I didn't spend a lot of time with Pat King or going through his stuff, but I certainly heard some of the rhetoric, and I didn't see the value. I didn't see how that would help at all. But what we did hear from the OPP was zero assaults, zero crimes, no damage to the highways, all the way from the Manitoba border to Ottawa, not a problem. Yesterday, all they could bring up from memory was the crowds were quite large and it was crowding the roads. So there were safety concerns there. Good problems to have, because that is Canada showing their support. So yeah, that's where I came from on that one. Now, Chris, actually, I'm going to go to Wayne quickly, and then I'll come to Chris, if you don't mind, Chris. Wayne, you've been watching quite a bit of this, and you've been seeing the finger pointing. Other than the OPP, how are you seeing the reputation of Canada be corrected? Because what we're seeing a lot of when we heard the first few days of testimony was Canadian residents are weak. The businesses are weak. It takes a small interruption to cause headaches for everybody. They're unable to tackle it themselves, and they definitely need a lot more help from larger resources. So other than the OPP coming out and saying, hey, look, we were there, they didn't use us properly. There was great intel that said this was going to be staying peaceful. It was going to last a while. So other than the OPP kind of trying to fix our reputation here, what else do you think Canada might need in order to come out of this inquiry with less of a victimization reputation and more of it was a big incident. You dealt with it, and it looks like nobody was going to be hurt. And sure enough, the government did overreact and use that EA, the Emergency Act, improperly. Do you think the OPP and other testimony will help our reputation internationally?
You hope so, don't you? I mean, all the protest videos that I saw, which were quite a lot. I mean, I'm not seeing it 24/7, but I mean, you guys saw everything down on the ground. So everybody was peaceful, shop owners were peaceful, but it's only the police that you're now hearing evidence from. So surely at the end of all this, you've still got your image intact. You know, there's no damage been done. As long as you can come through this and there's some sort of a corruption charge or something, because we spoke about that the other day, didn't we? You know, this is the kind of start to a possible corruption charge at some point in the future. So hopefully it lays the groundwork for that.
That actually is a great point. So if Canada came back and said, hey, look, not good, we did charges and really made a big deal about it, I think you're right. That might actually help their reputation a bit. I just noticed that, Wayne, that you needed to go. Yeah, so thanks for sticking around for that last little bit there.
No problem. Thank you for having me. I'll catch you later.
Take care, Wayne. And Andy, there's a nice video of Wayne coming out. He's a victim of vaccine injury. So there's quite the story. And I'm sure one day Andy, Wayne, and I would like to get Dr. Mackis involved to have a conversation about that. So thank you, Wayne. And you take care and get some rest, my friend.
Will do. I'll be back later anyway. I just need to have something.
No problem. We'll talk to you soon. All right, Chris. Well, I'll quickly jump back to you now. Is there a way to recover our reputation? We keep saying the government has lost our respect, but I just want to clarify, the government is made up of our neighbors and us. We really want to focus on the leaders of the government, because that's where the problems, I think, really start to stem from. We had a federal whistleblower kind of give us the lay of the land when it came to the two classes of government, the elected class and the non-elected class. So it's very different. I'm getting audio from the inquiry, so if that starts up, I apologize to both of you. We may have to jump off. But go ahead, Chris.
Well, there's pillars to that, right? And so, first of all, as far as restoring reputation, well, the freezing of the bank accounts, as far as financial confidence from international markets, that is something that is completely separate from our, how we're viewed outwardly from the world. I think that, when we look at this government, it's their unwillingness to throw anyone under the bus. It is, for 2 years now, we've just seen scandal after scandal, and even with the WE scandal, the historical narrative is Bill Morneau resigning for other reasons, and it wasn't specifically, he had his other things he was going to do. So in order to, I think it would be wise for government, and that's kind of what we're leading to, is that if things continue with some of the veiled threats we've seen, we're probably going to see a round 2 of a convoy. And how that's handled will either restore or, cause tremendous harm, and I think that we're in a situation now where if you look at the chilling effect, all of the tactics the government's used has been things to deter people from even thinking about protesting. Right now, I would imagine there would have already been another convoy if it wasn't for the fear of people losing their bank accounts. Like, certain things are not being addressed publicly by our opposition or anybody as far as what exactly did you just do and the damage that comes from that. We can remove COVID, doesn't matter what it is. I don't think that any Canadian finds it acceptable to have your bank account frozen for participating or even sending a $30, $5 donation, just because the government needs to use certain, in my opinion, the government needed to use certain language and to be able to qualify the actions under the Emergencies Act and certain things with Metro. And we even saw that with Diane Dean. She was labeling the T word, for people that are out there, bounty castles. So we're in a situation where some of the things that can be done for the people that don't understand the full game, the optics wise, those things I believe will happen. Will we actually see intrinsic benefit on the ground? For me, that's why it's to know it's dark, but to keep moving, right? You'll find those glimmers of light through it, but we really can't predict what the next move is outside of we know everything's on the table with this government. There's no restriction, there's no empathy, there's no compassion. It's a matter of means to an end, and if you get in our way, right? And if we bring hot dogs, I mean, again, it's one of those things. It's the resilience, right? I think it's, you know, it started this round is going to cause a problem. You know, when you have 82% of Canadians that are not fully in, well, whatever the government's definition is today of up to date in your medical trials, you're dealing with a much larger population. I always thought we were. Like, I think they use small numbers and they use, you know, subversive coercion is definitely on the table. But, you know, I think that we sent a message. I think our message, you know, if you look at the way the majority, like the 90% that are looking at us, we have been an inspiration to people around the world standing up against this. So I think that we have already redefined who we are as a people. And I think some people around the world, I mean, you saw what's going on in the Netherlands and other things, they're taking some of our initiatives and probably a lot of countries, what's Canada got up their sleeve next so they can take a lead off of it. And I think that, you know, as long as we're good inside and know that I'm a Canadian, free to speak my mind, you know, the Diefenbaker quote, that is now considered extremist in our country,
Right.
Which is a difficult place to be. But I think that we will work ourselves back. And then you look at the economic side, that's a nightmare. To get confidence back in our financial systems, that needs to be first. And the only way you can do that is to make sure that the bank account thing, which Freeland is some parts of it have made it permanent. If that's not addressed, it is going to be a consistent problem for us to get international responses.
Reputation back.
Investment, yeah. But I still think our reputation's good. Maybe not for our institutions, but as a people,
right?
They know what we're up to.
Right, and you made a good point there, the Conservatives. So there would have been no point to have a convoy if Peter O'Toole and the Conservatives were very vocal and very opposed to what was going on. Mm-hmm. I think the convoy itself was the result of our opposition failing us. They weren't even vocal enough to make us happy that there's even an opposition. You know, we ended up losing O'Toole over it, rightfully so. And really the only real leader that we saw, you know, doing stuff and helping and talking was Maxime Bernier, PPC. I think the convoy, you know, politely rejected his offer to get involved, but we weren't seeing the actual opposition do anything. And sure, there's a Conservative opposition, but hey, where's the NDP? Where's the rest of our opposition? It's pretty. Yeah, it's pretty clear there was no voice in the House, not loud enough, at least to the Canadian satisfaction, that there was going to be opposition to what's going on. Because it did feel like we had to just take it. And I think that's where a lot of the grassroots frustration really stemmed from, was the fact that there was no voice. There was no voice really being loud about this. Yeah, so we had no real choice. We had to do a grassroots opposition. I was proud of the convoy and their attempt, but I was sad that we had to do that, like that was necessary at all. So Andy, when you were doing some of your research and doing some of your stuff, what was your take on could the Conservative Party had made a statement or two before the convoy or as it was rolling out? Could they have pushed back harder, in your opinion, to Trudeau and his cabinet in the first place, so that we actually felt that there was opposition? Or do you think because of the situation, because we didn't know what was going on, that's kind of the way we could expect our government to run in those situations? You know, those are all kind of valid. Like maybe we had to go along with it, and that's why they did. But I personally, I don't get that impression. I think we knew a lot of the science, we knew a lot of the information, a lot of it's being validated now. So I think there was valid reasons to have strong opposition, and we didn't. So Andy, what do you think fell apart there? And is my assessment about that kind of correct, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're right. I don't think that there was any degree of elected opposition that would have given this particular group or movement a strong enough voice or push back hard enough against the Trudeau government that would have prevented it, though. Like, I think that it was an inevitability. And it was born out of sheer desperation, right? And that's partly why I joined. Like I said, I didn't necessarily, share all of their views, but I'm a strong believer in democracy and the right to protest. And when I went and met them, I didn't meet a bunch of defiant insurrectionists. Like a lot of these people were desperate, they were broken, they had lost their jobs. They had lost their trucks, right? People were making fun of them because there were so many pickup trucks. I was like, you don't understand, a lot of these people have already lost their vehicles and their jobs. Right? That's why we didn't have the big rigs. So, and my heart went out to them, and I just thought, oh my gosh, these people deserve representation. They haven't gotten it. This is literally this was like their last stand. I was really, really happy to see them regain hope in their country as they traveled along and their movement got stronger and stronger. It gave them back, their confidence in that, we were going to be able to repair this for them. So, I don't think that there was any degree of representation. I don't think if Aaron O'Toole had to come out swinging, I still don't think that they would have been able to rectify this. I think it was a necessary step and something that we had to progress through in our country to, get politicians standing up strongly behind us. And I don't think that support would have come in absence of this. So I think it was really, really good, and that the protests forced our politicians' hands and made them realize that they had to stick up stronger for our rights and freedoms in our country. And I think that, losing Aaron O'Toole was a good thing for the party. I don't think that the Conservative Party would have, I don't think that they would have won an election or had a chance of winning an election had Aaron O'Toole not have gone. So I consider that to be, I didn't have anything personally against Aaron. I think he would have made a fair and good leader. But I think that, in these extraordinary times, he wasn't the leader that we needed. I think that was somebody different, right? We needed somebody with some fire under them. And that's definitely Pierre. I've met Pierre a couple of times now. I've met all of the people who ran for the leadership race. I'm impressed with all of them, to be honest. And we did have Maxine on our side, and I've met Maxine too, like him. We have some differing views, and that's okay. I respect what he did. He was one of the first people to get on board, but we just didn't have representation that was going to stick up for us. And I think that, like I said, I think that this was like a step. It was a necessary step for the people of Canada to stand up and say, no, we're not returning back to pandemic measures. We're never going to go back there. And I think that we really had to make that very, very clear so that our health officials wouldn't slap down unnecessary restrictions on us. In the absence of good scientific proof in the future, I think that they're definitely thinking twice about that. Because I said I won't hesitate to drag another 1,000 trucks or farmers or whatever you want, right? I'll go block off a city in a heartbeat, right? If you try to put that back down on us, and I'm sure a lot of people would get behind it too. So, like I said, I wish it could have been avoided, but I think it just reached ahead, and it had to happen. Right? Back to normal.
And I agree. And we have a new Canada now because of it. I don't think there'll ever be another push that hard. I think if this inquiry goes proper, the truth comes out, Canada will not accept another overreach like that again. And you bring up a wonderful point that we keep forgetting about. These aren't just protesters that went across the country because they weren't happy with the government action. These were actually individuals directly affected, lost their job, couldn't work, very desperate, trying hard to correct it. And I do want to say something to all the people out there that think the truckers were being whiny because they had a mandate like everybody else. That's not true. We have 4 ways of moving commercial goods in Canada: rail, sea, land, and air. Land, which is the trucks, were the only ones that had that mandate. So captains of the boats and the ships, train engineers, and pilots did not have that mandate. So it was only for the land crossing by truck. And you can ask all day long, why did they pick that particular group? Well, push them hard enough, they're going to get loud and they're going to drive their trucks. And the pilots, are you going to really attack the pilots? No, they're a small group. What are they going to do? You're going to attack the engineers? Are you going to attack the ship captains? No, again, small group. What are they going to do? But you attack the truckers with a mandate that makes no sense. They're in the cab by themselves. They've been doing it all along already. From the very beginning of COVID, we had exceptions for them, and they didn't spread it. They didn't cause super events or anything like that. So there was very little logic and medical reasons for doing it. But I can tell you, because I'm a pilot, I have my license, we were not mandated to take the vaccine. You could fly without the vaccine all day long. You can cross the border too all day long as a pilot. There was no restriction. There could have been restrictions for the airlines themselves on their pilots, but there was no restriction on the profession like there was for truckers. So I want to let people know that they were targeted. They were targeted for some reason. I don't think we'll find out in this inquiry why they were targeted, but there's no question that they were targeted. And because that group was able to respond so quickly, because, well, they need to work, they can't stop driving. It then caused, I think, the catalyst to really move this thing along fast. So I did thank you, Andy, for reminding us that there were actual people who had paychecks taken from them and had no other choice but to at least be heard. And they didn't have local representation, at least they didn't feel like it, doing that for them. Now, I do know that there was some MPs that did step forward. So I've been reminded here, Randy Hiller and some others definitely did. I'm not saying none did. But what I do want to say is we didn't hear it loud enough, and it wasn't opposition enough to actually do anything. So that's kind of what I want to highlight there. Now,
question quickly.
Yeah, Chris, I was going to pass it back to you.
I looked at, you go to 30,000 feet and you look at the hegemony, and I've read all the conspiracy theories and stuff, but there's 72 secret orders that this government put into play. And we need
72?
Yeah, cabinet orders. And we know that the military was involved and stuff. I'm wondering if 30, 40 years from now, we're going to find out one of those orders was in order to prevent hesitancy or to create public disinformation, that a lot of the MPs were gagged. That's total speculation.
You think they were gagged?
I don't know, because all provinces in PHEC dumped their pre-pandemic COVID plans, right? And so a lot of these measures were new. They had all of this stuff was lined up. They got their influencers in line. They threw money at the media. They needed this message. Mm-hmm. So let's just say, this was a genuine health emergency, and then the population was at risk. It's a global pandemic. You don't believe everything. In order to prevent having those, because anybody who did got kicked out, like Baber and others, like anybody who tried to speak out, the parties tossed them. Mm-hmm. But there was very few MPs that spoke out. And I'll give credit to Leslie Lewis, because there was a few tweets, but then there was silence. And I started thinking, okay, the Conservative comes out, and then all of a sudden, boom, Twitter goes silent for a month. I think that, again, I'm not making an excuse at all. If I would have been kicked out, and if there was an order, I'd be in prison, because I come from a social work background. You don't do that to kids. You don't do that to seniors. You don't do that to your population.
Gotcha.
Unless you're a psychopath. But that's just my opinion. Not a clinical one.
No.
But again, could it be that there was that? All of the media and everybody was saying the exact, because everyone references the script, right? And it just seemed like that. Well, just as important as the script is nobody going off script. So how do you control that without an executive order?
Well, it was a difficult time, right? Because at that time, even saying anything about vaccine hesitancy was enough to get you off of media and stuff like that. Yeah. So it was a tough navigation for them. Now, a question for Andy and Joe. I'm sorry if your audio doesn't work. Maybe we'll try that again another time.
I think we're good.
Oh, you did? Sorry. I thought my bad. So next question is for Joe then. Joe, do you think independent representation might be something that we can start looking at? Because with this particular incident, if we had 2 or 3 independents per province who were very vocal and not being held back by whips or a platform, do you think that could have at least assisted with the voice being heard and at least give people a little bit more faith in additional types of representation other than traditional party representation?
Absolutely agree with that statement 100%. Independent representation now allows the government to truly be called into question. What we have here is no opposition. The people of Canada became the opposition because our federal opposition failed. All of our parties failed. Our entire governmental system failed us. If we had had true independent representation, accountability could have been demanded from the very beginning. And I'm not talking the beginning of this as in late 2020 when this was developing, or 21. I'm talking about from March 2020. When this whole debacle started, because it speaks to the total incompetence of the managerial level of government, from the city of Ottawa to the Valley region to the province of Alberta, province of Ontario, to the federal government. This was a complete example of incompetence on the managerial level. Again, we've seen it in the chat. We've heard it over and over again. More government, more incompetence. More people in jobs that all they want to do is just rubber stamp their work and get their paycheck, and they don't care. There's too many people governing Canada by committee as opposed to actual vote, law, act, and regulations that are for the common good and for Canadians. This government does not support Canadians. It supports globalists and other countries. Just take a look at what he tweeted out 58 minutes ago. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stated in a tweet from one of his media monkeys, "We'll continue to do whatever it takes to keep guns out of our communities," in relationship to banning handguns. You want to keep guns out of the communities? Start giving the police the power to actually deal with firearms criminality, and make sure the courts put people that use weapons in crime in jail for a very long time. That stops gun problems.
Here, here, Joe, can we get you to run for prime minister? 100% agree with that, especially the globalist take on that. We are running out of time. Joe, I sincerely apologize for not having you on sooner. For some reason, I thought your microphone wasn't go.
No, it's working. Great chat. And just a quick segue to Chris, I think what you said was very articulately put through. The way protests are going to happen in the future are going to be very different. And I think we have an awful lot to learn from our First Nations brothers and sisters in how to proceed on doing what's best for Canada.
On that, thank you all very much. The commissioner is back. Let's meet again on Twitter, and let's do this again. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Joe. Have a great day.
Ready to go?
Bye-bye.
Great one.
Okay.
The commission is in recess for 15 minutes. La commission levée pour 15 minutes.
Well, there you go. Break time. It's another long day. A lot more somber conversation, a lot more somber topics here. But let me just grab a bunch of notes. I got a lot of notes this time. So let me catch up on the last witness, because we're a little bit behind because we had some special guests during the break. By the way, if you guys like that, let me know, because I'm going to try and get some more guests like that, because a lot of people have things to say. There were a lot of witnesses to things, so the more the merrier is the way I see it. So Craig Abrams, some of the last things that he was talking about was he made it pretty clear that there were some improper requests from the OPS, so improper that his team had to ask them if the Crown was involved and stuff like that. Then there was also lots of talk about whether or not it was illegal. However, the police always work with their partners, and if anything's legal and they don't have any problems, they have no problems working together. It's very interesting to see how many times the OPP is requesting confirmation that this stuff is legal. The actions that you're trying to do, your plans are legal. Yeah, I just got another note. Lots about legality. The government of Canada was a little sad to watch, because they were worried about things like fuel, the crane. It was pretty petty. I didn't really like the questions or even the direction they were going. They kept saying industrial crane. Like, what does that even mean? It just means it's used in industrial environments. Anything over maybe 30 feet, you could start classifying as industrial. But was it anybody harmed? Was it used in a proper way? It was just a crane that was used, and nobody got hurt. But that's all they're pointing to. They're not pointing to actual weapons or actual barricades or actual tanks or armored vehicles or even fortified vehicles or something like that. They're pointing to industrial cranes. This is why I asked our UK guest, Wayne, what the outside of Canada perception of Canada is. How does it look to us when we're trying to justify taking a War Measure Act, Emergency Act, use it against its own citizens? Was this a war? And if it was, well, what is it we're complaining about? Well, some horns, some diesel fuel, some congested streets, a crane, an industrial crane, and a roasted pig. So I'm embarrassed that this is kind of the narrative that is rolling out, that Canada had to react in that situation. ornamental crane. Yeah, yeah, it was just there. Like I think they may have had a flag on it at one point, like a large flag on it. And if anything, it became a landmark. Like, go meet me by the crane would have been something that happened, or go meet me by the stage. But to point to that, from the Canadian government's perspective, like that was something to fear. Come on, please. We do have true enemies in this world, and true states that might actually want to do harm to us. You're not making our strength very predominant here. You're actually making us look very weak, and it's unfortunate. So let me jump back to my notes. So then Tom Curry, the lawyer for Peter Slowly, boy, did he ever rip into Craig Abrams. He was not happy. He was unimpressed because the OPP's general position is, well, we provided everything to the OPS. And of course, Slowly's position is going to be, I did everything I could with what I had. So if you have one side saying we gave plenty of intel to make better decisions, and you say the others have another side saying, well, I made all the best decisions I had with my intel, you can see why one side would be frustrated with the other. And this is what we saw with Tom Curry. And he's doing a great job, I think, as a representation for Slowly. He's asking the right questions. I think he's probing the right answers. And he's also showing the right level of frustration or excitement or aggravation with his questioning. Because, quite frankly, if Slowly was there, it'd be a lot worse. Because when you develop a relationship with your client, you spend a lot of time with them, you hear their side, you really connect with them, and you really understand where they're coming from. And when you are really passionate about your client, it will come out. And what I think we saw there was Tom was very adamant on being a very good lawyer and making sure that his client was represented, and very aggressively too. I didn't mind that it got a little snappy at times, because it didn't get rude like we saw with Councillor Fleury. Like, that was kind of rude, but it was aggressive. And what I think that ended up doing was establishing with the witness, get ready, you know what's coming. You're probably a professional at this as well. This is going to be a very controlled interrogation, less of an interview, more of an interrogation. So I was fine with that. And I think both the witness and Tom Curry handled themselves very well. I don't think either lost control. I don't think it went too far. I think it was, I think it was proportional to the levels of emotion that Slowly would be going through. And I understand where the passion was coming from. Now, on the legal side of things, he was doing a very good job of identifying what did Slowly know, how could he have known it, and it also turns out that he may have not been in direct connection with the intel from the OPP. Yeah, another one is that the narrative is really getting hard to follow. So if you're being completely independent and just looking at this, you kind of have two sides from the same side. So one of the narratives is, as they were coming over, the GoFundMe was growing exponentially. They had plenty of money. This was unprecedented. We knew this was going to be a big thing, because they were using that as a justification to block the money. You got to remember, there was two donations. There was GoFundMe and then Give, Send, Go. GoFundMe, they blocked that one, and then Give, Send, Go went as well. So they knew when the GoFundMe one was large, they had plenty of money. I also want to point out that on the GoFundMe website, it was clear as day what the money's for. You cannot crowdfund and fundraise without declaring what the money's for, and at least have some way to show that. What happens with GoFundMe and all the other fundraiser sites is they do make sure that these are legitimate fundraisers. It would be too easy to scam, and that's what they had when these platforms started. Lots of scamming, but they do make sure that it's legitimate. So it was declared. So every time we hear from the OPS or from the city or a counselor or something that they had no idea what this money would be for, they could be trying to fund, and I think one of them said fund truckers who were stuck across the border and they couldn't pay for accommodations. They thought maybe it would be used for that. Well, that was fabricated, because that's not even a stated reason for the fundraising. So there's no question that the fundraising itself, that they were aware of, they were very clear that they knew about it, itself on the home page declared fuel, food, accommodation, for maintaining the protest for as long as it takes. That was the general gist of it. So they absolutely knew. They also had a bunch of testimony from the BIA to say the hotels and their hotel association were reporting month-long bookings, multiple of them, a whole bunch of them. So there's no question that even through the BIA, they knew that it was not going to be a 2-day event. It was going to be at least a 4-week event. That's what the fundraising was for. That's what the bookings was for. And then at the same time, they try and say 2 days. We thought it was going to be 2 days. Most protests come in, they bring up placards, they communicate with us, they come in and go and leave. I want to ask maybe some protesting organizers from the past who went to Ottawa. Not only is that really your experience, but is that your expectation when you go to protest? Do you have a small window for the weekend and you got to get out of there? Is your idea of protesting just to throw a small little 2-day tantrum in Ottawa and then leave? Or is the protest what I think it is, which is a voice, and it's an aggressive voice, it's a loud voice, but it's there for a purpose. And if that purpose and goal isn't met, then you can't say how long it's going to take. So I think they were diminishing, they were kind of demoralizing previous protesters by trying to imply that they just come, scream for a bit and leave, treating them like a tantrum child. I don't think that's what protesting is. And I don't think the government or officials should be seeing it in that light. That is just a frequent nuisance. No, protesting is because something's wrong. This group believes that there's something wrong and they want to be heard. So I think it's very ridiculous to continue to say, we thought it was just going to be a 2-day event. And at best, they are really trying to get the OPP to say it would be a 2-day event, but it's not working. The OPP had intel. It was shared. The hotel bookings was a great example. Coordinating with the organizers, absolutely. The message always was we're spending a week to drive across the country to spend as much time as we need to in order to fix the families that are affected by this. I don't know how you can say I thought it was 2 days from that, but nope, I think it's very clear the OPP had intel, and they were definitely planning to stay for a little bit longer. The city of Ottawa, the 400 was a start. Okay, yeah, so look, they're going through all of these resources. They're talking about getting 400 officers from the OPP. It's just a start. It ended up being 800 officers in the end to clear everything. And they keep talking about these events like that was the only way it could have went. And the planning was all geared towards the only option, which was boots on the ground. That keeps bothering me every time I hear that testimony in that direction, that all they could think about was ending this through force, not ending this through anything but force. This isn't war. It's bothering me how these lieutenants and captains and superintendents, they're all talking like this was Canada's Civil War when it's truly just a protest. Saskatchewan. All right, Saskatchewan, love you guys. Always have. So many of my family members are still there. You guys nailed it. Great representation. Existing laws do cover all of the activities being observed. There was absolutely no need for the Emergency Act. That was basically all they had to say. That's all they were looking to say. I didn't hear them complaining. I didn't hear Saskatchewan complaining that they weren't part of the process. They're probably going to save that later for the Prime Minister or his cabinet or some of the higher federal ministers and representation we'll see from. But great job, Saskatchewan. You nailed it. You went right to the point. You went right to the law. Everything existed that would have handled the situation. There was no need for the Emergencies Act. The Democracy Fund also did a great job. He's got a great style. He's got his own little unique style. It almost seems dismissive the way his style is, where he's kind of just, he asks a question and then just and moves on. But anyways, it's effective, and I do like his style. He did establish that the OPP would have had to provide resources, would have been able to provide the resources without the Emergencies Act. So he went in there quick. He went in there sharp. He went in there to get them to say, no, we didn't need any additional resources that were provided by the EA in order to participate. So great job there from the Democracy Fund as well. And then we moved on to Captain Superintendent Carson Hardy himself. So he's a different type of witness. Doesn't seem to have as much energy and passion. However, he was the most senior, it looks like, that was dealing with this. And he's still providing good information. I think he's been a lot more diplomatic and a lot more political than the other officers from the OPP that we've seen so far. He's retired, so I have no idea what he would be protecting and if there's any cover you're going on here. But he's certainly a lot more diplomatic. He has been very clear, though, that from the hidden reports, they definitely were clear that trouble was coming, I guess was the term he used. But they were going to be coming from the long haul. So there was no doubt in his mind, even though he seems to not want to take a definitive position sometimes, there's no doubt in my mind that in his mind, because he said the words, they are coming for the long haul. So of course they are. They're coming from BC. I've driven cross country. That's not an overnight spontaneous decision to make. That's a commitment. This is Canada. It's a very big country. And then being a part of a convoy, you're not moving 100, 110. So yeah, it took a week, and there's no doubt they were picking up trucks and supporters along the way. We know some of the supporters from Students Against Mandates. They jumped into their car and joined. So complaining that the numbers were changing all the time and it was fluid, of course it was. Support was growing. All right, so we're back with the commission.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Back. Are you appreciated? We're going to rise.
All right, we didn't have to say hear the goodbye there. Excuse me. Wow. The justice at the end there had some excellent questions, and wow for Brendan Miller to stand up and ask that at the end, and double wow for the justice to shut him down on that, because yeah, that's absolutely correct. The witness just made some statements that de-escalation was attempted and it failed. That's baloney. That's nowhere near in the testimony prior to that, and that's likely why Brendan stood up for that, because he just basically told the commissioner, no, everything was going great, because we did everything we could. And that's certainly not true. We got a lot to cover. So what I'm going to do is really just start at the provinces, because I'll start at the convoy rep. So we had the Freedom Convoy come up and cross. Oh, wow, there's lots of notes here. I'll just start there. PLUs. So she used the PLUs a lot. It's the same as the PLTs, but that they were ignored. She pointed out rightfully that there was a plan in place on February 9th, and she had him confirm it, and he said yes. What happened to the PLU? Because they didn't find it to be tactically sound, so they shut them down on February 9th. I don't know why they decided to do that and why they decided it was tactically unsound to have continued negotiations and conversations, but there you go. And then she did a great job on having him confirm that the February 13th plan. Now, this is important because this is one of their tactical plans, and this is before the Emergencies Act. And now, please remember, the Emergencies Act is not meant to be something that's useful and just a tool that makes it easier. And it's not meant to be something that just speeds up some processes like swearing in or moving people off the street. The Emergency Act is supposed to be in response to no other option. So it was a great questioning to establish that on February 13th, there was a plan. They called it, and it contained a main action plan. She was very good at using the terms that were necessary for him to confirm that this is the part of the plan. So there was a main action plan, and then it has strategic direction of operations. So what are they going to do? The operations were completely planned out on a strategic level with the direction. That was a major portion of this plan. And it had a peaceful resolution as its main goal. And most importantly, and I know that this is why she had pointed this out, it had a reference to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms in it. This was the February 13th plan. Again, before the Emergency Act. So according to them, they had a plan that they could have just executed. Great. Now, the next part of her questioning was to establish the February 17th plan. The February 17th plan is another PLU tactical plan. It was also an action plan. And this one had a different resolution. It wasn't peaceful resolution. It was simply to clear and take down the protest. And then she kind of did the Matlock moment. She asked him if there was a reference to the Canadian Charter in that plan. The answer was no. So it became clear that the difference between February 13th and February 17th in the planning was what the EA gave them was the ability to trample on the freedoms of the Canadians, the charter rights of the Canadians, because that's all that they changed. The rest of the plan was the same, except for the peaceful resolution was removed and replaced with a plan, I'll repeat the quote, to clear and take down the protest. And then the Canadian Charter reference was removed. Thank you to our provinces again. So Saskatchewan came back. They did it again. They had the right questions, got the right answers, and they focused on what they needed to do there. Before I move to Saskatchewan, I'm going to jump over and check the chats to see if there's something to address here. Yeah. We will get to that one, Clay. Just wait, this may not be coming. Okay, I may be behind on your conversation. This is a very good background. No problem. No problem, Peter. I'll just keep going. So Saskatchewan, they showed up, and again, they did a great job. So the first question that they established was the Emergency Act required to create a command structure? Kind of uncomfortable question, but very straightforward and very easy one. The answer to that is no. They do command structures all the time. In fact, he expanded and said, yeah, we do these all the time. Was the Emergency Act necessary to create a plan? Again, the question was straightforward and very easy, and the answer is no, of course not. You wouldn't need the Emergency Act in order to create a plan. You know what Saskatchewan's trying to say here very clearly. You didn't need the Emergency Act. Then they asked, you signed off on the plan. He confirmed he signed off on the plan. And the February 12th plan had RCMP approval. It had, on the 12th, it had Ottawa Police Services approval on the 13th. And the OPP, you know, the captain superintendent here was confident that it would end the occupation. He still uses that term occupation, but we'll let that one slide because this was on February 13th before the Emergency Act. You can call it whatever they want at that point as long as they're following the law. And the Emergency Act wasn't required. And then the Saskatchewan got him to admit, and I'm pretty sure he wishes he didn't have to say this, but Saskatchewan asked, at that point, did that plan have any reference or requirement for the EA, for the Emergency Act itself? And that plan approved by the RCMP on the 12th and approved by Ottawa on the 13th, his confirmation was not at that time. So at that time, that plan had no need for the EA. Again, is the federal government even aware of this? Well, RCMP approved it on the 12th. I didn't see a reference to the Parliamentary Protective Services, PPS, being involved in that approval, nor do I think they would need to be. But the question is when did the PMO office understand and know about this plan? And what did they have to give them to make them believe that they couldn't execute on this plan? Because it looks like they got less than 24 hours from the period of time where the Ottawa Police Services approved it to when they quashed it and went ahead with the EA. And as you also heard in that testimony, this is still the plan that they did use eventually to move everything out. So they didn't really need the EA at all. They were still going to be executing on that plan. And then the one more question on Saskatchewan, which I think was good. If you needed the EA powers, would you have told somebody? There was some reluctance to answer that question directly, but in the end, he did confirm and he said correct. If he needed the powers, he would have told somebody. So what Saskatchewan's trying to establish here is, did you send an email that says we need the EA? And the answer would have been no, because there is no document in the document database. Saskatchewan looked. That's why they asked that question, because they knew the answer to the question was he didn't ask anybody. So you've phrased the question in such a way that he gets to confirm that, yeah, I would have had I wanted to. And that's why there's no evidence that shows that he did ask for the EA. Alberta came out swinging, just like Saskatchewan. They're really not taking any prisoners here. Alberta did another great job as well. Were there drivers that just... Oh, yeah. So what Alberta did great was they tacked the tow truck driver liability question. Hey, Alberta, Saskatchewan, if you guys are talking behind the scenes in order to coordinate your questions to get the biggest bang, great, because you're not overlapping, which is wonderful, and you're getting some good stuff out. So what Alberta rightfully did was, we all know that every province has its own version of the Emergency Act. Every province has an Emergency Safety Act, worded differently, but they're all basically the same thing. And the questions from Alberta were around the tow truck liability, because that was the big thing that this particular witness pointed to the Emergency Act as valuable to them for, which was to alleviate the liability to tow truck drivers. So if you don't know what that means, it just basically means that if they damage a vehicle or something bad happens, they won't be held responsible. If something happens to their stuff, it gets broken, whatnot, again, they won't be held responsible. The government will vitiate their liability and take care of them. What Alberta did a good job of is, and this witness didn't want to admit it, but there is liability coverage under the emergency provisions in Ontario itself. So on the provincial level of Ontario, their version of the Emergency Act does have liability coverage whenever they need to commandeer or get someone to do stuff. Usually that's all it takes. Usually alleviating the liability to a partner or provider of a service is enough to get them to go above and beyond, because compensation is usually something they do anyways. They will double, triple rate it. But the liability is an important one because that's something that can come up after the fact. So they like to get that issue resolved. And that's what this witness said the EA gave them, was the ability to tell drivers you'll be absolved of liability. However, Alberta pointed out very correctly that Ontario has that same provision, and they absolutely would have been covered. The province has coverage liability for sure, yeah. And would you agree that if Ontario ordered it, they would have protected it in the same way? So I'm going to quote him here because I did quote him. Not sure, and it wasn't clear. So he knows the answer is yes. He also said, I'm not a lawyer. You may want to talk to a lawyer. But 20 minutes ago, he was dead set on the liability issue under the EA. So he was an expert at that point on what liability coverage is under the EA. All of a sudden, he's now no longer an expert on the provincial version of an Emergency Act coverage for the liability, which is basically verbatim the same language because they're covering the same issue, just on a provincial level. So an expert 1 minute, a non-expert the other, because he knows the answer, and the answer is very, very bad. The answer is very clear. Alberta did a great job that said, hey, us provinces, we've got plenty of power. We could handle this stuff on our own. The EA was completely unnecessary. Then came our favorite Paul Champ, the Ottawa Coalition for Residents and Businesses. He's starting to grow on me. I didn't like him at the beginning because of his attitude. And I don't mean personally don't like him. I mean professionally. I didn't like him because of his attitude. I thought he was a little bit rude and he was abrasive. But he's starting to grow on me because he's throwing everyone under the bus. In our chats a few days ago, we were recognizing a lot of people being thrown on the bus. We were wondering who the bus driver is. It's probably Paul Champ. Paul Champ is the bus driver for everybody here. But I was a little weirded out by some of his concern for the powers that the OPP should have. He was really probing questions along the lines of, should there be a trigger or a way for the OPP to take over? Again, we talked about this before in the chat and a little bit in the break. I'm very uncomfortable with any idea that a provincial or a higher police has some sort of trigger or something in place where they can take over jurisdictionally another police force. I think all you're asking for if you do that is you're going to have police forces fighting police forces with police force resources. That's silly. I think if a police force requires help, asks for help, and needs help, of course, everybody's there for each other. But at no point should there become a mechanism where an upper level police force or an adjacent level police force or a collection of police forces somehow create a mechanism to take over local police forces. I think that's an incredibly bad precedence. I don't think we should be going down that road at all. If you don't like federalism, this is even worse, because now you have the police involved, top-down level, and that will be against the consent and willingness of the local police force. I don't have a problem with shared resources and shared commands and stuff like that. I have a big problem with organizations thinking that they can make other organizations do something because they've decided that that other organization can't do it anymore. So Paul's question at the end there was very, very dangerous in my mind, because that's exactly what he was pulling out. And it didn't stop there, because the very next witness was the OPP lawyer, who continued that particular line of questioning and thinking, continued it completely. Should there be a new central command was basically the entire questioning. And what are they talking about there? What are they talking about there? Are they talking about a replacement for the RCMP? Are they talking about a replacement for CSIS? Are they talking about bringing them together? Are they what are they talking about there? Are they talking about a new police force? Or are they talking about something that's not quite a police force, but something that's more just a command structure? Where are we going with this? I didn't like that conversation at all. I much preferred what they were doing already, which is partner programs. They would get together on events. I much prefer that kind of work on the police level and cooperation on the police level, because I'm not comfortable with a new central command, because maybe that will answer my previous question. Who's the one that decides when local police forces are no longer competent and need to be replaced? Well, it would likely be the new central command. And he also mentioned how it would require the participation of everybody. Well, we now understand what require the participation of everybody means. It means 100%, and it also means if you're not willing, they're going to find a way to make you get in there. This is all uncomfortable conversation to me. I don't like this at all. I think we're headed in the wrong direction when it comes to this. I want to go backwards a bit. For example, Alberta should have provincial police and kick out the federal police. We should be more local. We shouldn't be going the other way. Had one member of our chat bring up, and it didn't even cross my mind because I was thinking just nationally here, a new national command, but maybe the command is going to be coming up higher, so international. They mentioned the UN possibly. No, I don't think we're there yet. That might be some people's idea of an agenda or security. I don't think we're there yet. I think if Canada failed on in February, in that they did have their own January 6th and there was some sort of coup attempt, or there was some sort of violent outbreak, or if that actually did happen, then maybe I can see Canada trying to make the appeal to a higher police power that we need help. But without that, without like a complete collapse of our entire policing and our entire system, I can't even see us going in that direction. I can see us taking guidance from global powers and global organizations in order to create the new central command. And then I can see that our new central command would then become part of a partnership of other states' command centers as well, and then participate in a global central command. I could see that happening, but I can't see us getting direct command from an international organization. I don't think Canada itself could do that or would put up with that. But I think that if you push enough people in the right direction, like this OPP officer, I think you can convince enough people that a central command might be a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea, but I think you can convince some people that it is. And maybe that was the result, the goal of this particular event, by provoking and pushing so hard. Maybe they do want a central command. Maybe this is why they don't care about showing how poor OPS was, because this would be the template. A massive event, unprecedented, bigger than everybody thought. Local police force fails, collapses, bad problems. This could be the template for the new central command. I still don't think it succeeded. So I think if anybody's talking about a new central command, I think it's premature. I think this event actually went off well, except for the use of the EA. So I don't think this is going to hold up. And that was kind of scary to have both Paul Champ and the OPP lawyer heading in the direction of let's get us a new central command. And then Justice Paul Rolu, the commissioner, he asked some questions. These weren't bad. He sometimes gets me worried because I'm not sure where he's headed with it. He did do the question, what's the difference between a protest and an occupation? And I don't think he was satisfied with the answer, because the answer was, I don't have a distinction between the two. So that's why Mr. Rolu went back, or Justice Rolu went back, and he said, well, look, you can probably sell me on there are some rough dudes in there. Okay. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing. So in the summary, he didn't really talk like that. I'm just paraphrasing. But basically, he said, obviously, there would be some rough dudes in there. But for the most part, and you could certainly expect, there will be people who want to follow the law, do it peacefully, do a law-abiding peaceful protest. So surely there's going to be some of those people there. What happened with them? Because if they were not part of the lawbreakers, why would their rights have to be violated and then moved? I didn't like his answer there too, because what he was saying was he didn't really care. But what he said was, once we establish a zone, that's it. Once we've established and declared that it's unlawful, that's it. You could be peaceful, but we were going to send you somewhere else. And I don't think Justice liked that. I don't think he liked that at all. I think he was thinking about himself, or maybe his grandchildren, or somebody else who might be protesting legitimately and peacefully, and he didn't like the idea that they could get wrapped up with some wrongdoers. Then I think there was a very big mistake by this witness when he said, he lied to the commissioner by saying, to answer that question, well, our officers would have told them about another place they can go to be legal. I'm sure if our officers were asked, hey, I'm just here to protest legally, what can I do? That they would have been cordial and respond in such a way to provide them directions or information to the legitimate and legal protest locations. All right, let's just unroll that one for a second. First, that conversation never happened. There certainly never was time for that conversation. All you have to do is see the video to see what the police were doing. For the entire morning, they didn't speak to anybody. They just stood there ready to be intimidating and then ready to charge. And then you heard it. They would march forward a little bit and then take a new line. So at what point there, Mr. Witness, are they having these conversations with these protesters? Was it before they marched and stormed at them? Was it when they were grabbing them and handcuffing them? Are you suggesting they had this conversation in the van when they took him outside of the city and dropped him off without charges? Exactly when was this conversation happening? We know it never happened. And I don't think the justice fell for it at all, because the very next thing he asked was, well, did you set up an area for them to go protest on? Were you informing people that was going to happen, or that's what they could do as their alternative to protesting right where they were? And he had to admit, nope, no, we didn't actually. There was no place to go. So his entire fake story of talking to protesters in such a way because they understood of charter rights and all that stuff, that was a lot of baloney. And I don't think the justice fell for it. I think he actually saw right through that, because he slumped back and he was not happy with that response. And what I think he was doing was he was looking for something to hold on to and say, okay, look, they could have just went down the street and everybody would have been happy. And he was hoping the answer would have been, well, there was an alternative place for the peaceful, legitimate, legal protesters to go. But unfortunately, because this witness wasn't very honest about truly his thinking and his feelings, he created a situation that didn't exist, and then he got busted on it. So he was kind of impeached on the stand, in my opinion, on that question by Justice Rolu himself on his own question, because it didn't work out. Did you have a place to send them? No. Well, then, what you just said is a no-go. So today was definitely, I think, a little bit drier than most days, but this particular witness, I think, is showing you kind of the same pattern we saw from Mayor Jim. So Mayor Jim in the city, if you remember the two witnesses before him, his city manager and his chief of staff, both of them I thought was very good, truthful witnesses. Both of them painted a situation where there was negotiation with the convoy organizers. There was a plan to move the trucks south of Wellington and all this other stuff. They didn't do enough to meet with the mayor yet, but yet they were still moving things around and working deals out. So there was some moving and shaking going on in the city level. And then when the mayor took the stand, you hear a completely different story than his staff. And the mayor's version of everything is completely hellish. The whole world was coming to an end. There was no chance of anything finishing and no deals and anything like that. The mayor didn't just contradict what his staff said. The mayor kind of threw them under the bus. It was kind of like, no, we had no other plan. We had to move forward. This kind of happened a little bit here too, in my opinion, because we had 2 OPP officers who were straight shooters, straight with the truth and the information, and I had no problem with their testimonies. And then all of a sudden we get their commander or their captain show up, and he is far more political. He is definitely playing political cards a lot more than the other 2 officers. So why he did that, why that matters to him, I don't know. He's retired, but I didn't think he did a good job. I didn't think he was a straight shooter. He didn't represent the OPP as well as the other 2 officers did. He may have this agenda for the central command, and he may have been using some of this to be a bit of a power grab, as our guest this afternoon at lunch kind of alluded to. But I don't know. He's retired. I don't understand what his motivations would be. Well, I'm going to check the chats and see if there's anything to address. Other than that, we may have an early night. Yeah, exactly. Well, good night. Yeah, this is Peter. This is what sovereignty is. So for people who don't understand, Alberta is really pushing for sovereignty. Quebec has had it for a long time. First Nations have always enjoyed that part of the arrangement with the federal government of sovereignty. Lots of parts they don't enjoy, but that part they do. Sovereignty, Peter, and you probably know this, it simply means we're going back to the Constitution. So Section 91, 92, it lays out what the jurisdictional limitations are of the government. And I want to remind people it's limitations, it's not powers, because we have the power, the people have the power. What we've done with the Constitution is provided some of that in a limited way to the government. And we saw some of that conversation happening where the Section 92 is being violated. So driver's licenses and regulations, that's a provincial level item. Every province has their own database and they do their own thing because it's internal provincial stuff. It's not a federally required or mandated jurisdiction in the Constitution. Licensing and regulations is not part of that. So to hear testimony that there was conversation about suspending licenses for BC drivers for their participation in an Ottawa event, well, I'm telling you right now, that's a violation of Section 92. That violates Section 92 tremendously because the federal government has no power to suspend driver's licenses, and they have no power to compel provinces to do so. The simple fact that they said they could or would try to or even want to is all the more reason our provinces should have sovereignty, because that's federalism. They think there's this great power where we can control everything. And I'm sorry, but that is not the government we created back in Confederation. That is not the government we deserve today. And all the governments that have throughout history decided to go in that direction haven't done well. And I don't think they would be what most Canadians, if they realize, that they want. Wow, a bunch of stuff came in. Oh, that's one of those. Let's block that. You know, YouTube, you should be able to handle those a lot better. Okay, Peter. No problem, Peter. I think I came to that. Yeah, so here's what. Yeah, Clay, look, you're getting it. We're getting a lot of conversation like this. And now they're talking about putting the boots on local police departments. Like, are we not paying attention to what these people are saying? They don't regard citizens as free. They regard them as servants and subjects that need to be controlled. The boots on the ground is coming up everywhere. So boots on the ground for the protesters, boots on the ground for OPS. What's next? Boots on the ground for Alberta. Okay, I'm going. Yeah, so yeah, no, look, sovereignty is not a separation. Sovereignty does not mean we're cutting the border up. It's the complete opposite, actually. What sovereignty is if you want to look at it, here's one way I explained it to some people. Canada, 150 years ago, that was a much different country. It's nothing like it is today. Back then, we were far more developed on the East Coast, making our way through Quebec and Eastern Ontario. That's where most of the population was. Upper Canada, Lower Canada. When you look at Canada 150 years ago, it made a lot of sense why they broke out the Western provinces and treated them differently, in the Eastern provinces, and then Quebec and Ontario, why they treated all differently in Confederation during the setting up of Canada. But later on, as Canada developed and as the populations grew and as the provinces matured, we became legitimate, strong, individual provinces. So what used to work back then, I don't think it's applicable anymore. I think today, the idea was, since the 80s, and Peckford is still around, and I'm sure he'll attest to this, that was the time when Canadian provinces were supposed to grow up. They were supposed to mature, kind of like children. First we started off as a young country, then we grew up, became teenagers, now we're young adults. I think that in the 80s, that was the intent. We were supposed to become like young adults and be independent and handle our own resources and our own taxes and our own affairs and our own trade. But for some reason, whether it was through passive governments locally, whether it was through a lot of infighting going on, whether it was because of the resistance to energy and oil and other things, Alberta and other provinces really didn't embrace the sovereignty full-heartedly. Maybe they were just quite content with Canada at the point. But anyways, Quebec certainly did. Quebec always did. And I kind of applaud them for that, because if it wasn't for Quebec always pushing, they wouldn't have the concessions that they have today with the federal government, and it wouldn't be something that we can then start looking at in order to do the same thing for us. So since the 80s, we didn't do the sovereignty. We didn't become really independent. And then more overreach. Both parties would push the overreach a little bit more. And now we get to the point where we all throw our hands up in the air and say, oh my goodness, we can't even decide what to put into our body anymore. What's happened here? Good news is it's not too little too late. I think Alberta and Danielle Smith has a good idea. We're going to try and get that done. We'll support her as much as we can. And the best way to support people on this particular issue is to educate them that sovereignty does not mean separation. It's not a separatist movement at all. Even in Quebec, separatist movement is down to about 10% support. There's no province looking to separate from Canada. We want a unified Canada. We want a Canada that works well, a fine oiled machine, pun intended. So I think we should continue to support our leaders that are calling for a removal of top-down government. So any leader that is saying, no, locally we can handle our stuff, locally we should be doing our policing, and locally we can handle our civilians. Those are the leaders that you should be paying attention to, because the other ones are pushing our rights in the wrong direction. They're looking to push it up into centralization. They're looking to make it federal and maybe worse, global. I got a comment here from Peter. Yeah, well, look, and here's what happens with local government. Your federal government will shrink. Your federal government will shrink. There's less for them to do. They will end up doing other things. And don't worry about the people. The people in the federal government will find the same job locally. So as the federal government jobs stop being needed, the local provinces will need them. So don't worry about any federal employees. Everybody will get back to work. But yes, if you shrink your federal government and you have a persistent desire to put the power back to the people, responsibility back to people, the accountability, you end up needing less government. So if you're for smaller government, then yes, you definitely want more independence, you want sovereignty, and you also want to have local accountability. Now, if you're the type of person who doesn't want that, it sounds like the cities are the place for you, because that's where they really have a strong desire to have one big grocery store to take care of you. You have to live on top of each other in the big buildings. So you really don't have the ability to be self-dependent and self-reliant. To all those people that live in cities that do that, I would recommend to you to do everything you can to become a little bit more independent. It will only serve you better. The more you depend on something, and the day it's gone, that's the day you get yourself into a lot of trouble. And if you really do believe that our system and our government is unstable and is about to collapse, then the last thing you should be doing is making yourself dependent on that government. So all those people out there that actually think the government's going to collapse and needs a reset, then you really should be considering becoming a little bit more independent. And then to the rest of us who believe that the government just needs some tweaking, we got to get rid of a few leaders, and then we got to go in there and fix some things. Still, I think independent mindset is a better way to go. We had some great guests this lunch break. And one of the last questions I asked was going forward, because we didn't have very strong, vocal, unified resistance amongst our opposition at all, would an independent voice help? And yeah, I think it would. We did have some consensus there that independent voices are exactly that. They're independent, so nobody could shut you up. Nobody can make you be quiet. And I think going forward, not just the vocalization from an independent is important, but the oversight and the desire to go and get answers. So I can tell you that this inquiry itself is opening up a whole whack of more questions. We're not going to get all the answers in this inquiry. In fact, I think we're going to have a lot more questions after this inquiry. And one of my guests during the break, Joe Rampart, nailed it. We should actually be demanding and looking for some criminal charges. I'm going to hold off on that until we get through this some more. But it does look like there might have been oversteps on power. There might have been some corruption. There might have been some deals that are well beyond the line. But anyways, I'll leave that for now. I don't have any charges that I want to bring on anybody, but we'll keep our mind open and check it out. But I do think that there could be. So maybe Joe's right, and Canada will be frustrated and angry enough with some of the participants of this, and there will be charges. I'll reserve my opinion till the end as we move along, but looks like we're gonna have a great early evening, everybody. So thank you very much for joining me. We're gonna be starting again on 9 o'clock on Monday. And our very first witness, for those of you who've been paying attention, is Steve Bell. Steve Bell, he's a big one. So Monday morning, is he the chief of police or ex-chief of police? Anyways, during this time, he was the interim chief of police, and he may have been the source for all of the intel from the OPP, who didn't pass it on to slowly. So we'll check that out. Oh, no problem, Peter. And if any of you want to ever be on the show and chat one-on-one, I would love to have you. There's a lot of intelligent conversation flying around on my chat. So thank you very much, Peter. You're certainly one of them. Clay, you too. Hey, you have a great weekend as well. I'll be posting. I'll catch up. I'm going to try and catch up today on all my summary videos, which is just me talking. I take out the inquiry and put that video up. And I'm also going to put up the Freedom Convoy representation. I used to put it up as Brendan Miller, but now you see we have a second lawyer as well. She's a student at law out of Alberta. So I'm going to now make it, it's about any representation from the Freedom Convoy. And that video will be up as well for day 6 and day 7. So if you want to binge watch the Freedom Convoy representation, there's going to be about 4 hours of that video. And if you want to binge watch me, there's going to be about 9 hours of that. So go ahead. And I'll also put up our video from lunch. So we had 4 wonderful guests, Joe Rampart. We had Chris, he's my Twitter friend. And we also had Andy Lee. She was a wonderful guest. She did a lot of interviewing. She's in the press. She does that. And then we had Wayne Cunningham. He is my friend from the UK. He's a good man. And one day I'm going to introduce you guys all to him about his story outside of the video we did. I think we'll do another interview with him. And you too, James. Yeah, lots of chatting from you. So please come back. And if you ever want to be on, James, hit me up. Happy to have you on. Take care, Peter. Yeah, no, it was fun having them all there. Yes, that was a good group of people to talk to. And we had good representation there. Especially with Chris. Chris has a good background. He's very active in not so much the protesting, but in just the policies and organizations of First Nations and all types of people. So he was a wonderful addition. No problem. Take care. What I don't know is staggering. Yeah, no, and true. That's a true statement too. A true intelligent person knows they actually know very little, but they're very pleased with what they know, and they'll want to know more. Find you on Twitter and we'll continue to share. Thank you, Peter. Yes, and please do. Twitter is very active. I do get a lot of good conversations from all sides on there. If you're ever bored, there's quite a few threads in there where I'm talking to about UBI or other very hot topic topics, and we get a lot of good information from all sides on there. Go check out my fertilizer conversation. There's an interview with a government scientist who gave up the dirt and said that the Canadian government is following global science, but they can't explain the global science. So that's exactly what we want, right? Wayne's cool. Yeah, Peter, he's absolutely cool. Great guy. And Prairie, need a video of your last bit here. I'm sharing this. That will be up. So I don't know if you mean just this last little piece, but I do publish a video where it's just me doing this commentary part. So that will be there. It will be at the end. And you can go ahead and clip that if you want. But I put them all up, Prairie. So if you want to go through any of them, they're all going to be there. Well, that's the end of my comments, and I think that's my sign. I'm going to go and have a full dinner. The wife's coming home from Drayton Valley with sushi, and we're going to enjoy it. So thank you very much, you all, for joining me. This week was fun. It was a full week, long days, completely worth it. I am very pleased with where this commission's going. I don't think that I smell corruption on the commission level at all. But I certainly smell a lot of dirt and a lot of a lot of dirty laundry. That's certainly coming out. So thank you all. Have yourself a great weekend. God bless, and we'll see you all on Monday, 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Take care. Bye. And if you liked this video, remember to like and subscribe and press that notification button to receive more information like this. You can also follow me at yellowhead.vote to stay informed and get the inside scoop. Thank you.